a lot of anons. Like, I don't know, people don't pay it forward. But anyways, we're live, and I tweeted out the thing. So if you hear me pausing, it's because of the entropy.
Making sure everything clicks.
Yeah, it says we're live. So if I hear my own voice, here we go. There you go.
It all works out.
Yeah, it all works out. Is it? Where are you? 00000? Are you in Pacific time? Oh, we're like what, a minute late?
A minute late, $1 short, and that's why we're here.
My grandmother, I never knew my paternal grandmother. She passed 3 years before I was born. Tweet Jack, I wouldn't put that name there, to be honest with you. If you could delete that, I wouldn't want to get into any trouble, but with people's real names, which is a topic of this show. But anyways, my grandmother used to say that, a day late and $1 short, or I have wine taste and beer money. That was a great tag team in TNA, Beer Money. But
that's a great name.
Yeah. But anyways, this is a very interesting few weeks, and I would. A lot of people have said a lot of very stark and poetic things, and I think that we'll obviously have to spend time on what's everyone's minds. And actually, frankly, I'm kind of surprised, given the burnout rate of media events, that this really has stuck with people. There have been other, how shall we say it? It's only the first few minutes. There's been other mass casualty things that have only been in the public consciousness for about a few days, if that, which is very tragic and sad. Because I often debate with myself, is it better this way, or was it better in the past, where these things maturate into with a sort of collectively harnessed media environment pre-internet, where things become picked apart and mythologized and so on and so forth. But then to see that this particular thing with Charlie Kirk, it's a very strange thing, to say the least. But it's also Robert Redford died, so R.A.P. to Robert.
Yeah, Robert. Yeah, he died this morning.
But and also, 89. I guess before we say anything, Prude, we should also say that we say rest in peace to Charlie Kirk, and we pray for his family and his children. And it's almost strange saying that, considering the lack of shared understanding of what solemnity and respect and so on and so forth. And I think that the discourse around it has been, well, go ahead, Prude. I don't know what I can really. There's a bunch of things I've bookmarked. People have been firing off a lot of good, I want to say takes, but a lot of good opinions or things of that nature, communiques around this. But at the same time, I kind of realize that other people have done a lot more good things about this tragedy. But I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say is that we could probably talk about it in a more, we can never be truly objective. Let's be real here, Prude. But like, in a more like high-minded way, I guess you could say. But there's a lot of emotions that are running high, and I'm flabbergasted personally, and you know, go ahead, Prude. Go ahead. Sorry,
I mean, I don't have. Yeah. I was going to say it's been a tragic and a really rough 3 to 4 weeks. There's been a variety of targeted shootings and attacks at various schools, and not to mention, what of course happened last week with Arena, and now a week later, less than a week later, it seems. I mean, Charlie Kirk was assassinated by what appears to be very apparent left-wing terrorism. I'm surprised Discord hasn't been raided like yesterday. That frustrating as all can be. So, I mean, like, it's very strange because at the end of the day, right, like, you know, there's years of history, whether you want to go back to like 2017, 2016, sort of the original Groiper War stuff, to all the way to now, and the conversations in which he was going towards over the last couple of years when it came to the issues of like the Great Replacement, immigration, the compatibilities of civilization and the like. And you're kind of just left wondering where things could have gone or where things were going. And you really wanted to know where that might have been.
Well,
and
I've seen a lot of manipulated statements by people purposely contorting what he actually said.
Well, there's been a lot of that too on the left. I mean, especially whenever
it came
in regards to him taking a state, like they took his statement, I think, criticizing some other person's statement about a black person, wildly out of there. But what I'm trying to get overall is that at the end of the day, right, like I didn't start something at 18 and tried to make it work all on my own, and created effectively an organization that helped Donald Trump get elected in 2024. Because a lot of the get out to vote and voter registration stuff was sort of outsourced to TPUSA and other groups on the ground, which is sort of an impressive thing to consider, where a lot of people were kind of critical of that strategy. But I'm not here to do like a complete, you know, breakdown of his career or the things that he had said or things he should have done better. We'll leave that to more well-versed voices on the right, I guess, to do that, you know?
Well, I mean, I personally did not agree with everything.
Oh, of course not.
You know,
heavens no. You're not going to... it's very easy to sort of look at the laundry list of statements or arcs or whatever you want to call his character or his story in that regard and take issue with it. Yeah, there's plenty of things that we can.
There's plenty of things he believed in that I don't agree with.
You and I,
foreign policy.
If you and I were to break down everything that every person has ever said, yeah, we're going to find disagreements.
But I mean, I think the sort of the discourse on in mainstream media has been a very schizophrenic and fluctuating one. It's not a left-wing person because this is a Groiper meme. Bella Ciao being a Groiper meme song is really, that's like, I saw that, I was floored. Right-wing Reddit, that was another banger, by the way, an intentional banger. But also in terms of his beliefs, we'll talk more about this, but it's just they've gone from that to he deserved it because he was a terrible person and he wasn't a moderate, which means that basically everybody to the right of like some kind of mushy 2000s era writer like George Will or Charles Crothamer, I guess, like, no, I mean, they wouldn't even be acceptable nowadays. It's like, you know, I think it was in Julius, my mutual, that said on this particular day, any like last vestige of the civil open society in which people can have a public space of discourse and disagree but move on with their lives in a very liberal democracy, or at least what was that idea type of way, like everybody's, you know, we can pretend to live in an episode of, you know, Meet the Press or Firing Line from the 1970s or 80s. That reality is gone. That's, I mean, it was being stripped away. I mean, I personally doubt that if that was ever real, but that type of civil discourse in a quote unquote liberal democracy, that where people can have disagreements and share their opinions, but we can all agree on the integrity of ourselves as sharing a part of a common civilization, that is simply a lie nowadays. And there is no common agreement, and there is no real center, because even the center itself is not very what you would consider in a sort of civics class definition of what a quote unquote center of the political spectrum is. But yeah, sorry, I cut you off.
Well, no, I would agree with that latter part. Like the center is kind of broken. And I mean, I wrote about this today. I'm working with a friend of mine on sort of this little two-parter. We're experimenting on perhaps starting a publication with ourselves and a few other mutuals. But, you know, we don't have a monoculture anymore, right? You know, that's sort of gone. Everything is sort of this democratized, open, bifurcated kind of internet, digital media space, whether it's Netflix, Hulu, whether it's Blue Sky, Twitter, YouTube, or Twitch or whatever. And all of a sudden, younger generations, those who don't really remember a pre-smartphone era or social media era, you and I all inhibit sort of these weird pseudo realities, and we can kind of engage in almost a false consciousness, so to speak. And then all of a sudden we're left kind of reeling with the fact that you and I fundamentally live in a different reality than the guy who it was on the news today. They talked about the first court appearance of the shooter, or the alleged shooter, excuse me. And they talked about, the conversations with their trans boyfriend or whatever were actually really heartwarming. Like, you can go look this up and you can go see it. It's just like you and I live in a fundamentally different reality than the people that watch TV are being programmed by it. And it's like really terrifying because now all of a sudden
it's just like Daniel Day-Lewis in The Crucible, where he's talking to his wife and they're about to witch hunt him. Yeah, that's really this is what I mean, is that,
and because there's no center, there's no agreed upon a priori assumptions, like the liberal ideal of like, I think this, and well, why do you think that? Well, like, let's talk about it. I mean, like the memes and the quips and the tweets where people said like, you killed the guy that actually believed in winning hearts and minds and the liberal tradition of an open expression of ideas is pretty accurate. Like Sargon's take on it went pretty viral, like several million views, where he's just like, his entire job was to engage in the democratic process of an exchange of ideas, and they shot him anyway. Yeah. And I mean, this is the thing about, like, if you read about George Gerbner's like cultivation theory, like whatever you call the post-war consensus or like the democratic liberal order or even like the international rules-based order, so much of it has been predicated on establishing a secular eschatology of, we can't let these things happen again, whether it's the Second World War, whether it's nationalism, or whether it is
it's in the mid-century. And so.
Yeah, and I mean, like, that's really what this is. And we're haunted, as Paul Gottfried writes. He doesn't use this word, but like when he talks about this in Anti-Fascism, the career of a concept, that he talks about that, like, that is fundamentally like year zero of like the liberal world order that we live in.
And not just specific events, but we're haunted by political difference. That there can be no rival ideology ever, on the left or the right.
History has to
Communism end. As well is out the window. So
history has to end.
Yes, that's the only just. Well, I'll tell you the mindset of people, and I think the thing is that people talk about how the left has a very poor theory of mind when it comes to the right wing chud, whereas the right tends to have, I guess, because being subject to their ire, you tend to develop a very good theory of mind. Now, there are people who are...
Not always, but yeah.
Not always. There are people that make wild assumptions. I mean, having read quite a bit of leftist theory, I actually recently picked up a book that was published by, I believe, the Stateless Society or whatever, that Will Gillis, Lolcow. It's quite an interesting, funny read, but maybe we could break it down one day. Don't tell me how I got it. Don't some library sale. I actually got a rare Zbigniew Brzezinski book as well. It was quite a steal. But anyways, the theory of mind in this case is that when it comes to the right finally doing a bit of revenge by firing people who are shamelessly and openly gloating because they feel safe and comfortable because of the events of the past 15 years, where they can sort of normie sadism post all they want, without fear of consequences, the way that anybody, even with the most wildest of positions of the political right, especially in academia and in the media and in a lot of corporate positions. So, I mean, I would love to live in a world, let me say personally, I would love to live in a world in which, doing such tactics would be wrong, but you have to realize the way they look at this, okay? The way they look at this is that Charlie Kirk was a monster, and he was a fascist, and he was an Austrian painter fan, and therefore people and all of the justifications for even people who aren't explicitly going to certain rallies or certain events or having certain very colorful symbols and giving very certain colorful hand gestures, even people that weren't doing that, being doxxed and harassed and fired, and in some cases their lives even threatened. If you look at a lot of the activity of Antifa in Europe, for example, even people that weren't explicitly nationalists or so on and so forth, people being doxxed and harassed. But you see in their mind, that's all justified because they're defending this thing called modern, progressive, global liberal society. So therefore, doing it to someone very viciously and openly mocking and celebrating an incredibly evil thing to someone who is their political enemy, well, that's beyond the pale and that's unjustified. And therefore, going after people doing it is wholly good, okay? Because you can never do bad to evil. This is why the whole 2000s, or rather 1990s to 2000s, discourse of the left embodying a form of moral relativism, that's simply not reality. They're more moralistic than I shouldn't say that. They're more moralistic than a medieval peasant, but certainly they're getting to that level. They have an incredibly, albeit warped and inverted form of moralism, but a form of moralism that takes on the totality of their life. And if you actually lurk a lot of their discourse, I can't fathom. I know there's a lot of things in this world that I despise and hate, but there's a lot of things in this world that I particularly love. And to spend all of my energies, especially online, and all of my content just focusing, laser pinpoint, focusing on things that I hate, to me just seems like an incredible waste of time and would sour my soul. But these activist types, they don't have that. They love to do this. And so after all of the years, after the 2010s, even before the 2010s, of all the people that were doxxed and harassed and fired and physically assaulted, there were even just typical MAGA boomers that were physically treaded upon. I don't know what I could say for YouTube. Treaded upon at these rallies. People will forget this back in 2016, 2017. So that's all justified. And for the right to adopt the similar tactics of, freedom of speech does not mean freedom from consequences, that is a grievous error. And then they concoct this wholly different reality in their heads about you're forming, redact lists, and you're doing this, and you're harassing ordinary people. I'm just a small bean, never hurt nobody, right? Even though they harbor the most vicious and evil of fantasies, really fantasies of that I wouldn't even particularly, I probably would not rise to the level of that, that level of hatred, even to people that I consider evil ghouls and soulless. But at the same time, it's a very, very weird psychology, right? And people viciously mocking, for whatever you agree or disagree with Charlie Kirk, to go out of your way to viciously mock him and create a sort of meme around it and so on and so forth. I'm not going to lie, okay? I'm not going to sit here and lie to you. There's plenty of sadism and meme lingo and stuff I would disagree with on the online right by anons, okay? Just to be clear, there's a lot of stuff that goes on that I don't particularly enjoy or like, and I think is a miscalculation, even just purely in terms of strategy and optics. I would not endorse. Let's be fair, right? But these are people that are anonymous, that are often younger. I actually am penning an article called The Mind of the Dissident that would, I think, clarify a lot of this thinking. And you could say that that's cowardice or whatever, and that's fine, right? There's a lot of discourse on the political right that I would not necessarily endorse. But at the same time, these are people that are ordinary people posting with their real names and faces because obviously they feel that there is a moral protection there to doing such things, right? Now, you have to realize that Charlie Kirk, he was not all of those alt-right people. Now, I'm not condemning all those. I'm not saying this, but I'm saying from the normie standpoint of view, right? He was not some kind of cartoonish Austrian painter fan, right? But the fact that they feel a moral comfort in doing so, that is to me what's really shocking, right? Because, you could say, yeah, maybe it is a form of cowardice, because a lot of right-wing anons, they probably wouldn't say it to, ordinary people. All of the memes, I'm not going to, please don't post in the chat. You know the ones, right? You know the ones. And so, yes, there is a reality where the internet fosters particularly fringo discourse. But at the same time, the level and degree of sadism right in front of you from people that are using their real names and faces because they feel like there is no consequence for doing that. They feel like Charlie Kirk is a valid target, right? That to me,
What's
I
that
think,
famous like
astonishing.
Bausch phrase, right? There's no
no
bad tactics, just bad targets.
Yeah, exactly.
They probably wouldn't even stand by that now because they found this to be an acceptable target.
Right. No, because that's my point, Prude, is that they can basically say that anybody to the right of Bernie Sanders is an acceptable target. Because by definition, they are on a course of, they're in a primrose path of ideology where they could, wow, is there really a difference between George Will and Richard? I mean, Richard Spencer's not exactly on the right anymore, but like, is there a difference between Richard Spencer and George Will or Charles Crothamer or I don't know, George Jonas? I mean, only Canadians are going to get that reference, but like, is there a difference between Pierre Poilievre and George Jonas and I don't know, Graper 88? You know the one. You know what I'm trying to say here. To them, there's no difference between a George Will or a who's that guy that is on Fox News, the Five, Shep Smith. Is that the guy? There's no difference between Shep Smith and I don't know, Matthew Heimbach or whoever, really. So that is
there's no difference between Jonah Goldberg or Tucker Carlson.
Yeah, no, that's a great example, actually. There used to be little difference back in the day between the two, but then Tucker sort of went his own way. And
but I mean, to those that would champion such an act or even claim it as a cultural victory,
yeah,
I mean, like there's no difference. You speak out, like I mean, it's the same thing we saw, and I mean, everyone has rightfully called out and wants Destiny to face some consequences for blatant, like you at a certain point, like those would be charged under terroristic threats at a bare minimum.
Along with the CSAM and all the other stuff that he does.
Yeah.
But see, it's funny how internet lolcows, they have this Teflon attached to them where no real world consequences. The closest internet lolcow that ever came to real world consequences was Christine Chan, Chris Chan. And just then it was not really a jail sentence. It was more of like protecting this person's sentence, right? CWC said CWC actually got along in the jail. But there seems to be this like this layer of metaphysical plot armor to the lolcow from facing real world consequences for objectively terrible things. But sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
I mean, that kind of thing and I mean, he had said it blank today. He says, well, if they don't want these things to happen, they should just basically let us win. I mean, he's called for blood. He's called for all sorts of things throughout the year. So it's just, what else do you have to say?
What logic right there? Just let us win.
Yeah, just let us win.
We're not going to destroy you. Just let us win.
Just let us win.
Yeah. So do you know what I mean when I say that this whole illusion of like discourse in an open society, that's an illusion and that's not real, right? Now, but anyways, sorry, go ahead. That's a shocking statement. Did you see? I mean, I don't even want to mention the Piers Morgan thing because you know what? I will get a bit angry here. The Piers Morgan thing was just pure slop, and Piers Morgan is a slop merchant, and he should know that bringing on such an odious and despicable character and having him debate a close personal friend of Charlie Kirk, Jack Posobiec, what did you think was going to happen, right? There's something about that's even more disturbing than like the internet blood sports thing. Like when Richard Spencer debated Sargon, that was funny, and we all remember the quotes. But something about it is so lurid and disgusting and disrespectful, and it's I can't believe it. What did you think he was going to do? What did you think? He loves this. He loves this because it's and if you were the little guy, would you also not love it? Because that there's really, at this point, no real world consequences whatsoever. Because like I said, lolcows have a plot armor. And so, all this attention and hatred, because even bad attention's attention. And so, I condemn people like Piers Morgan for doing such a lurid and disgusting spectacle. And at least Anna Kasparian had a little bit of had sense to know what was going on, and at least didn't totally make the left look terrible. Although they've kicked her out of the left at this point. She's evil. She's a Russia shill. She's she hates poor people, but whatever. I mean, yeah. But I saw that clip from Piers Morgan and I was not impressed, to say the least.
I don't think anyone's been impressed with Piers Morgan in years. I can't recall a time when Piers Morgan was like, oh, this is where I ought to be.
Yeah.
I just don't.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly, Kit Spike, and she's a valid target. And you think it's not a joke, actually. I've seen people say and listen, I've critiqued Anna Kasparian on Oren. I don't buy a lot of these people's game, being centrist or whatever, but I have seen leftists celebrating the fact that she was almost, whatted by a homeless person. I've seen, so yeah, she's a valid target.
And that's the thing that I had written about today is like at a certain point, the idea of saying that there's such a thing as is there a normie anymore?
Yeah.
No, I would argue that there kind of isn't at this point. Like normie just becomes a designated term for a person who is not an adherent to my specific political ideology, which, okay, fine, right? Like that's I guess an acceptable definition for a subgroup or a subculture.
Hey, Prude, normal people?
Actually, yeah. Well, people I would consider normal, but even then, why do I consider them normal? Because they're not terminally online like me.
No.
However, do they still have similar beliefs that I do? Yeah, to a large extent.
No, the setup was that you were going to say, I was going to say, hey, Prude, normal people? And you're like, yeah, what about them? And I was going to say, have you seen any lately? It's
no, because you're right, but that's the thing. Have you seen any lately? The answer to that is no. Like this morning, every Tuesday morning I have sort of like a coffee hour before work with friends from church, and it's just a guy space. And this is the most this is your 30-year-old boomer speaking, right? And I'm the youngest of this group. Everyone's relatively my age or a couple years older. But I'm the one that's not yet married with children, and so there's one other guy that goes who's
soon to be corrected.
We'll see, and I have another friend there who's a little older. He's married, doesn't have kids, and they're middle aged. They opted not to have any. But I'm listening to them talk, and they're talking about the horrors of public school because one of them's a public school teacher. They're talking about trying to find a private Christian school that doesn't have the same problems as other places do where there's been cancellations, or how to make budgeting work with homeschooling and all that jazz. They're talking about how tragic it is that Boy Scouting has died. So it's yeah, I haven't seen any normal people because it doesn't matter how far removed you are. Two of these guys don't have smartphones, and even they're wow, things are really bad.
My mom went to church, and the Catholic priest, said something about Charlie Kirk. I didn't know he was that popular.
Yeah, there are so many things that are just not what's the word I'm looking for? It doesn't matter how far removed you are from Twitter or whatever. The discourse kind of comes from it in other spaces. But you're right. There are no. I'll stick to the claim that I kind of made. There aren't really any normies anymore.
There are, but
there are, but not really.
Yeah. That's what I mean. My mom was asking me, who's Charlie Kirk? She went to service, and she's like, the priest talked about it. I'm like, oh my God, I didn't realize he was that popular. I thought Charlie Kirk, I guess Steven Crowder's at least was before he soiled himself. I don't know. He was up there. All of those rebel media luminaries like Lauren Southern, the ones that. Notice how Rebel Media has a terrible track record of maintaining e-celebs, but anyways,
so
the only, but I didn't realize Charlie Kirk was that popular. I mean, it's, and I think that I'll give you a perfect illustration of this. Now, there's a debate going on. There was a stupid, I believe our good friend Yerk called him the human bean mouth cartoon. It was some YouTube Soillennial video essayist on TikTok who was talking about how this person, I mean, I don't know what to say without getting angry or banned off of YouTube. The alleged culprit, the alleged monster that did this, that it was all memes and all was vibes and it was all shit posting and it was like it was the sort of like postmodern ambiguity of the internet age, right? Now, me and you, Prude, we talk about this a lot, and I think that level of analysis, people like you and me and Kat and other people on Substack who are great writers in internet anthropology, we talk about it in a lot of cases. For example, the recent one with the Catholic school children, how there is a very like sort of nihilistic abandon to certain meme plexes and being an online edgelord and affiliate with certain groups with numbers and letters that I'm not going to name because frankly, I don't want to give attention to such stuff. But in this case, when you could not get a more clear motivation, really, honestly, given all of the facts that are admitted by this person's family and so on and so forth, to then go around and say that is when the discourse about online radicalization meets meme culture, meets the sort of nihilistic abandon of youth growing up in the age where there's nothing for them, there's no future given to them, no picture of the self they can dwell in. That analysis is all fine and good. But when you get a case like this, to lie about it and say that, well, I don't really know the motivation. This person doesn't live in, and yeah, of course, this person doesn't live in reality. But to say that there was no clear-cut ideological motivation, you would never say that about a right-wing person going and doing that. And there has been a few, unfortunately, that I condemn, that I've actually gotten heat for in the past for condemning. Certain, we can name names, but I'm not going to. But right-wing people that have done despicable things. No one is ever going to split hairs about that. But when it comes to this case, while he was young and it was all just a shitpost, he wasn't living in reality, and there's this postmodern ambiguity of the self, and he's a meme poison and irony poisoned. No, this wasn't irony poisoning. I'm sorry. Okay, there's cases to be made with other events of a similar tragic, terrible nature. But I don't know. I mean, call me skeptical, but this seems kind of cut and dry in terms of why Charlie Kirk was targeted. And I think that having been somebody who has laid this similar analysis, which I think can be quite valid when it comes to a lot of lolcows and people on the internet that live on the very edges of humanity. But when it comes to this case, I don't know, maybe I'm just a bumpkin, maybe I'm just a propagandized chud, but I don't know, it seems pretty clear what the motivation was here. And to then use that analysis of postmodern internet age ambiguity against that to cover for your own side. I'm sorry, there's something about that just seems odious to me. But I mean, I have done this type of analysis, but you know what I mean. I hope I'm.
You make sense. Yeah. You're fine. I mean, I think that.
It's just,
all things kind of boil down to the response, and I know that government takes forever to actually get its feet off the ground, but like the momentum is in your hands. Like you've been in this tragic moment. If there was ever a reason to actually punish your enemies and not just online right wingers doing work of documenting and cataloging hundreds of thousands of people across the United States and the world, really celebrating the death of a 31-year, like he's our age, man. Like
he's a year younger than me.
He's a year younger than you, and he's a year and some change older than me. Like, I mean, like it's crazy to think about in that regard. And like I said, you and I are online. I don't want to say nobodies, but I mean, really, in comparison to Charlie Kirk, we are absolutely nobodies.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah,
and like I said, in
comparison to Stargon, we're nobodies.
Yeah, even in comparison to him, absolutely. And it's just like,
I'm
but
trying
it also
to change that one day. I'm trying to change that.
But it hits differently, right? Because like you kind of realize, if you've ever worked in mainstream politics, you don't really think about the risk of those things. I mean, like we. And then I'm brutally reminded that what was his name? Who was the guy with the bike lock? Clanton, right?
He was a
Used to be
professor with a comically long neck.
Yeah.
That Michael Clanton or whatever his
Michael
name was.
Clanton bike lock case. What was it? Eric Clanton? Excuse me.
Eric Clanton.
And he got 3 years probation. I just want this is about a decade ago. 3 years probation.
That was like the guy with the purple hoodie that
and he had a mask and everything,
woman.
and it was at a rally in Berkeley. Yeah. But like again, 3 years probation. Guy could have killed someone. 3 years probation. Same thing with all the other animals and just savage activists that do these sort of things. One side has been told for decades that there are acceptable targets. And we all do, right? Like this is the premise of normie sadism, right? We all have acceptable targets. And when you are primed and then you're given we're under an immense pressure cooker. Like, I mean, this is the thing about social media, right? Is that it alters our perception of time. Like you and I have lived through 5 separate doomsday predictions about climate change alone from Al Gore to Greta Thunberg, right? And like countless others in between. Or we're still here. Polar ice caps are still here, right? And I'm not here to talk about climate change, but my point is that
if you listen to the stream I did with Zoomer Schopenhauer, maybe your mind will change.
Well, I mean, I'm not a denialist that we're radically altering the environment or anything like that. I'm a pretty.
But saying like this specific date is when the carrying capacity is going to overreact, and it's like,
but like that
2012.
This is the thing about modeling, right? Is that you can easily bullshit it. My point is that like our ability to change the perspective of time is so radically altered, and our perceptions for when the future will be gets overshadowed by every day is a new eschaton on your timeline or a new thing that causes the end of the world. And it's just like, well, these people don't really believe in God or the second coming or that he might return in a thief in the night and therefore be working. Instead, it's like, give the government all the money. Like, make sure that I can't have a first world standard of living because my children are going to be alive tomorrow. Why would I have kids or whatever? And so when you have that kind of political pressure cooking and you're being told day in and day out, it's 1933, like the guy is the new Austrian painter, like you must do something, you must take up the arms like Rosa
White
Luxemburg.
People do something,
and then again, when you're told to do something and that silence is violence or compliance with fascism, are you surprised that anyone is gonna maybe be radical or drugged up enough to do it? No, I'm not. And I don't mean to say that like I'm some sage or I'm some like chud who like called it years ago. I didn't. But I think that given the rate of political violence and escalation and the absolute gaslighting from these think tank, puff up, smoke up their own ass type of policy wonks telling you, well, most violence is right wing. And it's just like, you counted a homeless person who said a racial slur while high off his ass as a right wing hate, like violent crime. Like, no,
it was like that homeless guy.
You don't get that claim. You don't get that claim.
That was like that homeless guy that Opie and Anthony interviewed that said he was going to essay the Queen of England. Like, it's like, what, it's, there's all sorts of ways of cooking statistics. We know this from, for example, gun crime in America. It's a heavily politicized, cooked up type of thing. But this is a old hat thing. And it's very funny how for years they've done this sort of like reverse ideology pulling of the, special snowflake, now the cancel culture on the right. And you do see people like Boghossian and James Lindsay who are like, this is just like cancel culture. And it's like, well, it's really, I don't know what to say to that, but I'll give you a good example about how things become politicized and how things become so fraught from the tragic and stark and terrible reality of the thing to where people can do despicable things without really thinking about it because they think that it's the moral thing to do. There was, and yes, I will say that is the right wing politicizing the tragic, terrible, disgusting redacting of Irina Zarutska. Of course, I will admit this. This is true. But there was this mural someone painted of Charlie Kirk on top and Irina Zarutska underneath, and that mural was defaced. Not just Charlie Kirk was defaced, but Irina's portrait was also defaced with some stupid slogan about ending oppression or some crap like that, right? Now, Irina Zuritsky does not, now she is no longer, if you had to pick a perfect victim, that would probably be the closest you're going to get to a perfect victim. A person escaping war, a young woman with her whole life ahead of her, you know, as we've said it last week, tragically, her life was cut short by somebody who frankly did not belong in the streets, who had a rap sheet a mile long, and who the system felt in that jurisdiction to let onto the streets. Now, this person is no longer a person. She is an ideological target. And the oppression, quote unquote, of the person that took her life outweighs her very savage and brutal and needless end. So that would compel somebody on the political left to deface. I mean, okay, I understand. Like, I do not endorse, but you can see from that hyper politicized logic that yes, Charlie Kirk was a conservative activist, and so I would understand their ire of defacing a monument. I think it's despicable and disgusting. But to deface a portrait of this Irina Zuritsky woman is, well, that really is proving my point here, is that she no longer gets to be a person, a victim, a person who is tragically lost by a destructive and corrupt system. She now is an ideological target. So the fact that they could paint over her eyes, I found particularly disgusting in that one mural, with some meaningless platitude about ending oppression. And I mean, are they on the same level? Maybe not, but at the same time, I think, she was not a conservative activist. She was not somebody of any particular persuasion from what I see. She was just escaping a tragic and terrible war. And but her life now has become politicized. And you could say, wow, the right wing politicized her death. And so therefore it's I have the right to then deface her monument because it was the right wing that politicized her death. That is a situation in which, because of the dynamic of largely online political discourse, that person is no longer a tragedy. She is, again, another target. And that is incredibly dangerous. Now, could you say that maybe it's in poor taste for the right wing to politicize her death? Yeah, of course. I would agree to that. I think that her death brings up a very important point about the criminal justice system or lack thereof. But at the same time, I mean, I saw that and it was something, it's just abominable. Abominable. Now, could you say that putting it next to Charlie Kirk, that's, an act of politicization? But to go out of your way and deface her the same way you would deface Charlie Kirk is just, I have no words for that. It's terrible. And yeah, so, man, that's depressing. But you know what I mean, Prude.
Yep. And the response to it's been sort of just a shit show as well. Not just the private side, but also with government. The only slight thing I may have chuckled at in the last week was a rare moment where Christians and online pagans, we all stopped fighting for 5 seconds when we realized Kash Patel might want to immigrate to Valhalla.
That was, yeah.
And it's really odd because it's like Hindu FBI director, Mormon governor, surrounded by like presumably nominal Christians. Is like, I'll see you in Valhalla, brother. And it's like, all of us kind of stopped the fighting that we do on Substack and Twitter. And we're like, uh-oh.
You know what that was like? That was like the famous goalie fight between Felix Potvin of the Toronto Maple Leafs and Ron Hextall. There was a huge scrum where everyone on the ice, I think Wendell Clark was on that line in the Maple Leafs. They're all fighting, right? All of them. But as soon as they saw Potvin and Hextall come together, they all stopped fighting to look over at the goalie fight. It was like, it reminded me of that moment, It was like everybody stopped fighting for 2 seconds. They looked over like, what the hell is going on? That was a classic moment in Canadian hockey history. But no, that was, yeah. But no, but yeah, politicizing Arena's death. I mean, okay, whatever. You could say that that's in poor taste, but to face a monument of this young woman, it's just it's despicable. It's evil, and whatever you may think about, oh, the system failed this person or this monster. It's just I don't know. It's just anyways. Yeah, but yeah,
it really does sour the mood these last couple of weeks. It's hard to stay maybe lighthearted or anything on a show because how can you? I mean, the worst possible things that have taken place are there for all of us to see, and you're sort of just left reeling because it's like, well, what more can there be said?
Yeah. There's been a lot of great observations, but then there's been a lot of there's this one by in Julius I'm looking at where he says the rhetoric that wins is this concept, specific person, organization, institution, ideology is the enemy. The rhetoric that loses wars. This vague, amorphous, non-specific abstraction that is everywhere and nowhere is the enemy. And then he also says post-liberal marketplace of ideas. You win the debate by having your interlocutor fired, imprisoned, or redacted. And that's a very, because like I said, like I wish we could live in William F. Buckley firing line reality where, we can all, or back in the day when I was younger, I used to watch the Corrin show before he went insane. And he would have people on the far left and people on the right. And, you had like Claire Hoy versus Sid Ryan, the head of the CUPE union. But those days are, unfortunately not, I don't think we'll ever come back. And it's just, yeah, it's depressing. But anyway, I don't know. I had like a lot of ideas of what to say about it, but then I think that other people, yeah. So
I think that, you don't have to have I think it's always important to remind yourself you are not required to have a hot take or a poignant point at all times, and that it's kind of important, as I've said before, most, if not all, thoughts on a live stream are ever going to be fully fleshed out and complete unless you're reading off a script or you have your notes where the thesis statement is written. So it's okay. I'm sure I'll have more poignant things to say as time goes on. I was complaining this morning in this really dumb way because I'm writing a piece again for Frontier magazine, which is the Blaze's like sort of prestige print quarterly magazine. And the thing that they had asked me to write about, or the pitch that they accepted, was the one, once again, I didn't expect them to take. Like last time I wrote for them, they took my video game idea. This time they I was going to write about television and the strange death of late night. And I've got like 1,000 some odd words written down. And I was looking at it on my phone this morning and I said, this all feels really dumb to write about, like all these other sort of puff culture pieces, because it's just like, the culture wars as we've known them have effectively been made kinetic by a loose, organized band of cells and terrorist networks funded and propped up by NGOs, pharmaceutical industry that benefits and profits billions of dollars a year off the chemical castration of adults and children alike, and have seen billionaires spend billions of dollars to ensure that the law is fundamentally changed by judicial activism to ensure that criminals are never punished and that you, the upstanding net taxpayer citizen, never gets justice. Right. And it's just like, okay, then all these other things feel really dumb to talk about, And I'm sure, and I mean, and that should motivate you, like.
Well, it's a cultural piece, Prude. I think it's valid.
No, I get that, but like that should motivate whoever's listening. It's just like,
I talked about Canadian landscape painting. Nobody seemed to care.
And this is the acceptable shit, right? Like,
I'm still
where we're at.
YouTube screwed my views, but anyways, yeah.
It happens.
I screwed myself. No, but I've been thinking a lot about content that's worthy of being produced lately. But But why do you think that the late night piece was irrelevant, Prude? Because
I said, man, it just felt dumb to like. I was looking at it and I was like, man, it just felt so dumb to want to keep writing this piece. And I'm like, I am gonna finish it, obviously, because I'm not gonna say no to a chance in being published and having a byline. But like, it's really frustrating. I just kind of felt like, wow, writing about Colbert and like the death of a TV monoculture feels kind of dumb in the wake of Charlie Kirk getting assassinated.
Yeah,
and
well, that was all slop, but I mean, sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, sure. You know what triggered that conversation? That was the editor and I were talking. He's like, "Have you ever seen the Larry Sanders Show?" And I was like, "Yeah, I remember that." And he's like, "You ever notice that like all the celebrities that he had as a guest on his fake late night program are more or less still celebrities today, and we don't really have new ones with the same star power as before the internet?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's kind of true, because it's just like." Yeah, there's Sydney Sweeney, or yeah, there's like, what's his name? Like Glenn Powell or whatever the actor is. But like, I guess because we still have people like Leo and Brad Pitt and like an older generation of actors, like I guess like that's all that matters for right now. Even literally me, Ryan Gosling is like entering his like mid to late 40s. So maybe he's even older than that now. I don't know. Oh no. You took me away.
So how do you Oh, sorry. There you go. Sorry,
there we
I was
go.
Screwing around with the.
No, screwing around. Clearly.
Sorry, but
no, you're fine. And so it's just like, well, that's what we're talking about. And I was like, well, I had this idea about how to talk about like the death of monoculture and sort of democratized culture spaces. So,
yeah,
because
well, at least some people in the chat are not Philistines and appreciated my 4-hour podcast on Canadian art. You left out Arthur Hemming, Gio. I was mortified. I will talk about Arthur Hemming.
This is how you know you have very dedicated fans.
Yeah.
When a guy goes, you didn't mention so and so.
I always preferred Robert Bateman, but I think Arthur Hemming's illustrative style is more like peak Canadiana, because I do think that Robert Bateman ventures into like Audubon cartography territory. But I always loved Robert Bateman because I too paint in acrylic, and I feel like that's very brave, and he's very adamant about it. And anyways, sorry, Prue, go ahead. Yes. But I think like the thing is, we can call late night television slop, but that slop had an appeal to like tens of millions of people.
Oh, I know. I know. It's I think because we didn't, I mean, I occasionally saw like David Letterman. I really liked Craig Ferguson when he was on the air, but I mean, he was like, I was the ideal audience. I was like a 15-year-old through turning 20, 15 through 20 in my young adult life, laughing at dumb jokes with him and Jeff Peterson, the robot. Like, it's just sort of strange because like you and I were not around when Johnny Carson was the thing where everyone asked the question the next morning at work, "Did you see Johnny last night?" Or even to some extent David Letterman, but I for the last couple of weeks, I've mentioned this on previous episodes, but like I went down this weird rabbit hole looking up the late night wars and sort of the history of late night television and everything like that, and what led to Saturday Night Live and all of that other jazz, because Johnny Carson wanted to stop doing more shows and he didn't want to have to deal with a rerun on Saturday nights. But like, it's just sort of strange to think about, because it's like, man, none of that kind of matters today, because the people who watch television are all getting older, or their viewership is dying, and they're not as like, they don't have the same sort of popular, everyone can kind of like him for different reasons, like Conan O'Brien, right? I mean, his fan base followed him wherever. So it's just kind of strange. I mean, that's all the reason why I thought it was interesting. I mean, I'm still going to finish writing it. It's just like, it's just sort of this moment tomorrow where it's like, man, it just kind of feels dumb to look at and write about and like try and finish this like 3,000 word piece, and then it's like, oh yeah, like they killed Charlie Kirk, and it's just like all you have this moment of like, oh, for nothing, this is all pointless. That's all. That's
man, all. It does seem pointless, in a sense, but I think that ultimately these things are not pointless if they can create a greater awareness of culture. And I think that it's just the events of the past few weeks are they're so weighty and they have a gravity to them. But it's I don't know. A lot of people were saying, I don't know. I think even Sam Hyde in that video said like this, what's happening now is going to determine the course of the next decade or two. And I don't mean to black pill or pour water on things. I mean, maybe. But the one hot take I will deliver is that I think that unfortunately there is a pattern within certain key personnel that the Trump administration is entrusted fumbling the bag. And I think Pam Bondi is one of them. I'm not singling her out because she's a woman, by the way. I'm just saying that some of the most stupidest statements, and it's just, I have this feeling of dread that it's like the Trump administration 1.1, where certain key people fumble things for the administration as a whole. And the reality is that, will a lot of meaningful action happen from this? Probably not. Will, for example, like that professor in U of T, they put her on leave, but is she really going to be gone? Is she going to have tenure stripped from her? No, of course not. There was a tenured professor who dressed up in his best Antifa gear to go out to a counter protest in Toronto. It's like, to me, that was so crazy. Like, you're bordering on 60 years old and you're like pretending like you're Michel Foucault in 1968, throwing bricks off the Collège de France roof with your students. Like, oh my God, like, give it up, man. Like, why would a tenured professor say something stupid or do something stupid? It's beyond me, right? But no, I mean, a lot of people that have been fired, the people that I could imagine a lot of these companies are going to quietly hire them back, and they're going to weather the storm. And will Trump label certain organizations domestic T-wordist? Probably not, because people, like I say, personnel in the administration who they have loyalty towards, who are not on the ball. I mean, yes, that is a black pill, but I do think not to say that there's any positive out of this thing. There is no positive here with what happened to Charlie Kirk. But the one thing that is rather illuminating is that I do feel like this is very different than a lot of the other terrible, terrible events that have happened, even just in the past year. It does seem like there is a watershed moment. Now, whether something lasting and meaningful happens from it, I don't know. Like you've always said, Prude, on the show, or have you said in your articles, we've been tricked before. How do you say it? We've been let down before.
Oh, playfully, we've been hurt before.
We've been hurt before. So, yeah, it's 50 minutes, and I'm sure I can say the word terrorist. But I think Foucault mocked Sartre's throwing a brick in 1968 with it could have been the last barricade. That was actually pretty good. I'm gonna hand it to Michel Foucault. That was actually pretty good. That was I could have been the last barricade. Oh, that's pretty good. Sometimes academics can gem out by ribbing each other. That's actually pretty good. But no, I mean, even like tenured professors are LARPing as revolutionaries. It's like, it's very, oh my, I'm sure like if the shoe was on the other foot, and maybe, but I don't know. If I was in academia, I certainly wouldn't be LARPing as any revolutionary. At least I hope I wouldn't.
I hope not, but you never know.
Yeah, of course. I mean, yeah, I even say this about my artwork. Is my artwork going to really change the course of history? I mean, well, I don't know. It's just probably not. Right? Let's be real. One would hope. I said this to my GF when we were in the McMichael. I said, I know that one day I'll probably never be in these walls, but you never know. If things were different. I'm not saying that I'm good enough. I'm not as good as Tom Thompson or A.Y. Jackson, obviously, but I don't know. It's just one can have certain dreams, but
and dreams are good to have.
Yeah, I think that's a part. So let's move on. Speaking of dreams and people having very low dreams and very kind of like materialistic fantasies that don't relate to an rich inner spiritual life, let's move on to the article of tonight, The Bourgeois Mind, by the famed and brilliant Anglo-Catholic writer Christopher Dawson. And I said to Prue that we could read the chapter from the Brendayev book, The Bourgeois Mind, that he mentions this piece.
I was about to say, so if you want, so it's hard to find a translation for that book, I've been told.
It's not in his archives.
It is. However, I'm not plugging myself tonight. I'm going to plug our good friend, George Bagby. He has the Nicholas Berdyaev essay recorded that he has done. So if you would like to hear a Southern gentleman give a reading of it, as he has done so many other great audiobooks, I will recommend that you find George Bagby on YouTube. He's got it on his channel. And if you're interested,
he's on YouTube.
Yeah, he's on YouTube. Just go look up.
He's got
George
a real
Bagby.
Southern accent.
This man is as Southern as it gets. He's one of the. He's like, as my friend Christopher Sandbach likes to say, there are like 5 true Southern conservatives left in the United States at any given time, and George Bagby is one of them. So if you're interested in Southern history or American history in general, go check out his work. He's also the owner and proprietor of Tall Men Books. The Old Glory Club gave him a grant to help publish a series of books that have been long out of print on American heroes and American heritage. Recently, he has been publishing a series of books on the life and the works of President Andrew Jackson. So tallmenbooks.com, TALL menbooks.com. Be sure to go check them out. But he is a great friend and an excellent historian if you ever get the chance to chat with him. But yeah, he has the recording of Nicholas Berdyaev's essay. So if you're interested in knowing what essay where it gets referenced today, then you can go check out Bagby's channel.
Whoa.
All right, I'm done shilling. We're good.
All right. And see those super chats. I know that's kind of been a very depressing.
That and Tucker's live.
Yeah, I know. That's why our view count is a bit lower this evening than it's usually is by halfway through the stream. So to compensate for that, please need those super chats. I prefer it on Entropy. The people in Entropy are doing great work. And yeah, that's, so please. I mean, this is what I do. And I hope to, I've been thinking about changing up my model of things lately in terms of content. So, yeah, I know, Purple Guy, we're felted, but that was such a funny thing when iDubbbz felted himself by mentioning Kino Casino. Like, are you stupid? Like, listen, I've made the mistake before of entertaining, well, anyways, but like to just like anyways, that's not, it's anyways, it was funny though. It was a funny video where they were like, they went to this fancy steak restaurant in Toronto and they were eating good, the Kino and Nectar on the table. iDubbbz paying for it. That was funny. I actually was listening to Tucker Carlson interview Sam Altman. I'm not a big fan of Sam Altman. However, I am becoming more of a fan of ChatGPT. But I thought that was a good interview. I thought, like, me personally, I wouldn't be as confrontational because I am, wholesome chungus or whatever. But I felt like it was a necessarily confrontational interview because what Sam Altman, I think, is used to as a tech pioneer is like softball about like the capabilities of ChatGPT or open, what's this thing called? Open AI? Yeah. I thought like Tucker Carlson brought up a lot of very, very uncomfortable questions. And, me not being a huge fan of Sam Altman or Elon Musk, I thought that Sam Altman did pretty good. I'm not endorsing some of the allegations against him, obviously. There's a lot of allegations against him with different stuff, but I thought he handled it pretty well. I thought Tucker was grilling him where you could tell, like, it's pretty clear Sam Altman has, a form of the tism. And I think, like, Tucker didn't pick up on that. But anyways, I thought it was a good interview. Not to say you should go over and watch Tucker Carlson right now. You should still be watching this stream. But just, oh, boy. Anyways, let's get to the
article in question.
Okay, share screen. Where is it? Here we go. All right. Catholicism and the Bourgeois Mind by Christopher Dawson. And I believe this was published in the mid-'80s. Yes, it was published in the Notre Dame, the Brownson Institute in Notre Dame.
1986.
Wow, 1986. That's when that's when my parents met each other. Anyways.
Same, actually.
And we were both born.
When did your parents get married?
I believe in 1986. Yeah.
Okay, mine got married in 89.
Oh, okay. So that probably explains the
3-year gap.
3-year gap between.
Probably. It is eerie that Gio and I have lived somewhat similar lives. We were born on the same day.
That's crazy. You know how I realized that ChatGPT is better? Because I tried asking Grok about the concrete block and precast company that my father's cousins ran and they owned and operated. It was one of the largest block producing companies in all of North America at one point. And Grok could not find a single record. But as soon as I started using ChatGPT, it found this like buried public records of all concrete companies in Ontario in the 1970s. And I'm like, I was stunned. I couldn't believe it. Grok is such a piece of shit. But anyways, I'm sorry to get all offended. I'm not a particular fan of Sam Altman. I'm not a particular fan of Elon Musk, to be honest with you. But anyways, Catholicism, the bourgeois mind. The question of the bourgeois involves a real issue, which Christians cannot afford to shrink, for it is difficult to deny that there is a fundamental disharmony between bourgeoisie or bourgeois and Christian civilization, and between the mind of the bourgeois and the mind of Christ. Now, the Berdyaev book is actually quite a good one in terms of analyzing this phenomenon of the rise of bourgeois society from a non-Marxist perspective, which I feel has been covered in, been buried in academia, because a lot of, having gone through a political science graduate degree, most political scientists are either liberals or they're Marxists of some variety. And so I feel like any alternative to the two is often cast aside. But this is when Notre Dame was still, Notre Dame, just barely in the 80s. If you listen to E. Michael Jones, he believes that Notre Dame turned in the 60s, which is probably true. But anyways, my God, you had the summer program where nuns and priests would sleep with each other. And I remember that. You're like, yeah, EMJ is like a huge hard-on against Notre Dame. I think maybe they kicked him out or something. I don't know. Anyways, but first, let us admit that there is no use hunting for the bourgeois, for we are all more or less bourgeois, and our civilization is bourgeois from top to bottom. And this is a great distinction right here that you have to make, even though he's critiquing it, right? You can't escape it. It's like the people that talk about postmodernity. You are postmodern, whether you like it or not. I hate to say it. Hence, there can be no question of treating the bourgeois in the orthodox communist fashion as a gang of antisocial reptiles who can be exterminated summarily by the revolutionary proletariat. For in order to liquidate the bourgeoisie modern society would have to liquefy itself or liquidate itself. This is where Marx went wrong. His theory of increasing misery led him to suppose that the line of class division would become sharper and more strongly defined until the rising tide of popular misery broke the dikes and swept away the closed world of privileged bourgeois society. Instead of this, we have seen the bourgeois culture, the bourgeois mind, even the bourgeois standards of life advancing and expanding until they become diffused throughout the whole of social organism and dominated the whole spirit of modern civilization. Because you could say that even academic revolutionaries themselves are, basically terribly bourgeois, whether they want to admit it or not. So, and so in order to understand the essential character of the bourgeois, it is necessary to disregard the moment, for the moment, the universalized bourgeois culture, which is part of the very air we breathe, and turn back to the time when the bourgeois was still a distinct social type, which could be isolated from the other elements in society and studied as an independent phenomenon. And I know it's a cliched talking point, but as people have said, even rich people have iPhones and poor people have iPhones. So, yeah. Do you want to add to that, Prude?
No, I think that we can. Nothing so far to add to.
Yeah. Now the bourgeois was in origin the member of a small and highly specialized class, which had grown up within the wall of the medieval city commune. Far from being the average European man, he was an exceptional type standing somewhat outside the regular hierarchy of the medieval state, which was primarily an agrarian society consisting of the nobility, the clergy, and the peasantry. His very existence was guaranteed by character of privileges, which constituted the city commune as a regime d'exception. Thus, there was a sharp division of material interests and social culture between the bourgeois and the countrymen, a division which was deepened in Eastern Europe, including Eastern Germany, by the fact that towns were often islands of German speech and civilization amidst a population that was predominantly Slavic. And so, while the peasant labored and the noble fought, the bourgeois was free to lead his own life, to mind his own business, and grow rich within the narrow limits of the medieval urban economy. But as we'll see, like the bourgeois quickly takes over everything. And really, managerialism is co-tandem with the bourgeoisie. And all of these distinctions become mute because now you can have a citizen soldier, you can have clergy living as a normie middle-class person, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Yep. And this seems infinitely remote from the modern world. But we must remember that it was not so remote from the society which the founders of modern socialism, Lassalle, Marx, and Engels, belonged. The German bourgeoisie had just emerged from a regime of corporate rights and privileges which bound the bourgeois to the corporation. The craftsman to his ghetto, the peasant to his land, and the person from the Middle East to his ghetto. The generation before that of Marx seen the structure collapse like a house of cards. So the world was suddenly thrown open to any man who possessed money and enterprise, and this is to say, every good bourgeois. Thus, the process which had taken centuries to develop in Western Europe was completed in Central and Eastern Europe within a single life, whereas in England and the United States, the bourgeois spirit had already become a fluid element that interpenetrated the whole social organism. So it's only till we get the post-industrial revolution in the Anglosphere, the bourgeois takes hold. In Germany or Austria or Russia, it was still a new factor in social life. And so it was easy for Marx to separate it from the rest of society and regard it as the distinctive mark of a definite limited class. And notice how Anglosphere liberalism has a wider, or rather earlier tradition in these places. Whereas, I mean, Germany later, but then Germany was pulled into liberal democracy in the 20th century. Russia still remains the exception all the way into the mid-20th century. And there are a number of, basically all of Eastern Europe has not really experienced the sort of bourgeois-driven liberal democracy, quote unquote, that we have here in the Anglosphere and in Western Europe.
No, revolutionary pressures hit harder.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But also I would say that even Scandinavia, like the north of Europe, they've had this long-standing communitarian tradition that I think, on the one end, made them more bourgeois earlier, but had a different flavor than the Anglosphere in a weird way. Like nowadays we're all living in global America, so that distinction's kind of like irrelevant. But yeah. And this explains why class hatred comes more easily to the Eastern than to the Western Europe. Is that Croce, like the Italian cross? Yeah. Croce had an amusing story of how an Italian delegate to a German socialist congress was obliged to apologize for the lack of class hatred in the Italian socialist movement. We do not hate, he admitted, but we are quite willing to. And in England, socialism, even the will to hatred, had been lacking in spite of the fact that the proletariat in England suffered far more than the proletariat in Germany from the coming of industrialism. For the leaders of the English socialism have been idealists, whether bourgeois idealists like Robert Owen and William Morris, or Christian socialists like Keir Hardie and George Lansbury. But while we may well congratulate ourselves that English social life had not been poisoned by class hatred and class war, well, I mean, if you pay attention to like Adam Curtis, not really.
Or the Fabians.
Yeah, or the Fabians, yeah. It does not follow that the complete penetration of English culture by bourgeois standards and ideals is a good or admirable thing. It is even possible that the victory of the bourgeois had meant the destruction of elements that are not merely valuable but essential to English life. Since that English tradition is something much wider and deeper then the machine-made urban and suburban culture, by which it had been temporarily submerged. And you have to realize that as an Anglo-Catholic, Christopher Dawson has this, of course, huge reverence for the English liberal tradition and so on and so forth. So actually, we have only to open our eyes and see that this criticism is justified. The devastated area of industrial England and the cancerous growth of suburbs are not merely offensive to the aesthetic sense, they're symptoms of social disease and spiritual failure. The victory of bourgeois civilization has made England rich and powerful. Well, not even anymore, but at the same time has destroyed almost everything that made life worth living. It has undermined the natural foundations of our national life, and so the whole social structure is in danger of ruin. And he wrote this in the mid-'80s, and look at the UK now, unfortunately. Not to say the UK has fallen, but I mean, certainly it's in a terrible state. I mean, we can admit that. But yeah, so looked at from this point of view, the distinctive feature of the bourgeois culture is its urbanism, the YIMBY, right? The mixed-use, walkable cities. It involves the divorce of man from nature and from the life of the earth. It turns the peasant into a minder of machines and the yeoman into a shopkeeper until ultimately rural life becomes impossible and the very face of nature is changed by the destruction of the countryside and the pollution of the earth and the air and the waters. And this happened quite rapidly during the Industrial Revolution, where people were destitute and forced into cities and so on and so forth. This characteristic of modern bourgeois civilization in general, but nowhere is it more striking than in England. And since English culture has been historically a particularly rural one, the victory of bourgeois civilization involves a more serious breach with national tradition and a more vital revolution in way of life and thought than in any other country in Western Europe. That's pretty true. But if the bourgeois is the enemy of the peasant, he has no less the enemy of the artist and the craftsman. And this is very interesting. As Sombert has shown in his elaborate study of the historical evolution of the bourgeois type, the craftsman, like the artist, has an organic relation to the object of his work. They see in their work a part of themselves and identify themselves with it so that they would be happy if they could never be separated from it. For in the pre-capitalist order, the production of goods is the act of living men, so to speak, incarnate themselves in their works, and so it follows the same law that rule their physical life in the same way as the growth of a tree or the active reproduction of an animal obeys in its direction and measure and the internal necessities of living organism. The attitude of the bourgeois, on the other hand, is that of the merchant whose relation to his merchandise is external and impersonal. He sees in him only objects of exchange, the value of which has to be measured exclusively in terms of money. It makes no difference whether he is dealing in work of art or cheap ready-made suits. All that matters is the volume of the transactions and the amount of profit to be derived from them. In other words, his attitude is not qualitative but quantitative. And I think that's a very good way of weaving a sort of non-Marxist. I mean, it comes off as very Marxist, but at the same time, in terms of what's being lost, is quite different from the material analysis of Marxism, which is quite interesting.
There's a spiritual condition that Marx writes about, but his successors never really do.
Yeah.
Like, this is something that Bowden picks up on with like modern liberalism corroding the soul.
Yeah. But it's very funny though, because I mean, in a certain reading of Marx, I mean, I know a certain tankies and Haas people talk about this, but like in a certain sense, you could say like there is a loss of a traditional relation to nature. Like when Marx talks about species being, when Marx talks about primitive communism, quote unquote. But at the same time, Marxism does treat it as a necessity. That's why even the Soviets had this very strange fascination with futurism, because to them it was an element of the fluidity of the class subject of human nature being submerged in this huge dialectical process. And at the other end is not traditional man. There is no such thing as traditional man, but rather something else. And I think that's why the Soviets always had, like, even their space program, they called them cosmonauts. So but it's very different from, I think, what Dawson is trying to get at with traditional Catholicism and so on and so forth, and like this veneration of the English worker or craftsman or artisan that's close to nature, or the coal miner, right? So it is easy enough to see why this should be, for the bourgeois was originally the middleman who stood between the producer and the consumer, as merchant or salesman or broker and banker. And thus there is not merely an analogy, but an organic connection between the role of the bourgeois in society and the economic function of money. One is the middleman and the other is the medium of exchange. The bourgeois lives for money, and not merely as the peasant or soldier or even the artist often does, but in a deep sense, since money is to him what arms are to the soldier and land is to the peasant, the tools of his trade and the medium through which he expresses himself, so that he often takes an almost disinterested pleasure in his wealth because of the virtuosity he has displayed in his financial operations. In short, the bourgeois is essentially a moneymaker, at once its servant and its master, and the development of his social ascendancy shows the degree to which civilization and human life are dominated by money power. And this is basically seen in all avenues of life. That to just sell your time, right? Yeah, which is, that is something that Marx, I think, aptly pointed out about, you're basically selling the essence of yourself to garner a wage. And that transformation means that you are going to get a wholly different subject. Now, people talk about why is it that the nouveau riche in the 19th and 20th century to the, billionaire and tech mogul nowadays, why do they have such an utter lack of taste? Because they don't come from any aristocratic tradition, whether you want to question the rightfulness or wrongfulness of those aristocratic old money traditions. There's certainly a lot of evil that comes with a lot of, old money types. But at the same time, they had an ability to cultivate a sense of general culture as a steward of it because they had this understanding. But when they were sort of these legacies that were losing material wealth, they still had cultural wealth and they still had a social position. But when it came down to it, the new moneyed classes overtook them in such a staggering way, because it's indicative of our greater materialistic culture to begin with. And, there is a huge sea change in the nature of people that are the movers and shakers of society. Hope this doesn't get deleted before I have time to listen. I don't know. Do we say anything that offensive this stream, Prude?
No.
No, there you go. Yeah, we're probably...
We haven't had to do that in 6 months.
But anyways, do you have anything to add, Prude?
Man, there's not much here in parts where I actually agree with this. Although the question is like, are we money makers now? It's very interesting that has become I don't want to say like petty bourgeois, but like it's become so like the grind, like in our postmodern society, like the whole like producing and desiring machines, like we become the object of our own production. And so, I'm a money maker. I want to be rich. And this is why, like you said, the nouveau riche types are absolutely do not feed Gio's paranoia. Absolutely sex frequent. But like that's why like a lot of like what you would call like the bourgeoisie mind is now existing in like sort of this weird grifter class where like, yeah, they probably can't afford that Bugatti, but they're probably hurting really bad right after.
What color's your Bugatti, Brokey?
Where's your dad? Yeah. Sorry, it's my answer every time I hear that thing. Where's your dad? There's a different way to respond to that, but I'm not going to say that one live on
like
air.
A millionaire though? Like, wasn't his dad real?
The other one I've heard, Gio, I can't repeat on air. So
oh yeah. Okay, yeah.
No, but like the money maker. It's very funny because like now that's just sort of like grind culture, which is very particularly associated with
yeah,
that's so true. Although I guarantee you, if they hosted a Night Owls right now, they will spend 35 minutes on some election in bumfuck nowhere.
Or they'll talk about Eddington again. That was a good episode, though. That was a good.
Have you seen Eddington yet?
No, Sean Weiland has to get on this.
Oh, okay,
I have to
okay.
see it. Oh, I think there's a
I
Daily
watched it,
Motion. Did
and
you
I'm
like
blown
it? Or...
away that it's like the only COVID era film made.
I think because people wanted to forget. Like, didn't Michael
I know
Bay
people want to
create
forget.
one?
I know people want to forget COVID, but like, I want a million more movies like Eddington. Not exactly like Eddington, but I want
Not
more
by Ari
movies.
Aster. But,
I don't want more Ari Aster movies.
we
But
want
I
a
want
Mel
more.
Gibson clownvid movie.
I want a Mel Gibson.
I want a
Goof
Vincent
movie.
Gallo clownvid movie.
I want a Robert Eggers COVID movie.
You would, yeah.
I want a Robert Eggers COVID like plague tale epic.
It's sort of like how Stanley Kubrick could not allow Francis Ford Coppola to have the definitive film on the Vietnam War, so he had to like create his own masterpiece about the Vietnam War. It's like Eggers has to like create his own clownvid masterpiece. He can't let.
I want a Wes
Ari
Anderson
Aster...
COVID movie.
Didn't Michael Bay try to come out with one? But people.
I want a
like,
Michael Bay COVID movie.
No. What happened to the Michael Bay clownvid movie? There was a trailer, but I think like he canned production because like people were like, no, we do not want this. Because like I think it was still going on at the time.
You're probably right.
Yeah. But it was about a guy who was like, going around on a bike as a career. I don't know. I've been binging a lot of I'm gonna do the found footage. I found a writer who I believe is published by our friend Dan Baltic. Who's also
that would actually be like found footage would be actually the perfect COVID film.
Yeah,
it would be, and the reason why is
that was like that movie, the infection or infected, or it was a movie like it was like that. It was like
a zombie film.
No. It was like a plague movie, but it wasn't like found footage. But it was like the vibe was, well, it's similar to the Crazies as well. I guess you could probably do something like the Crazies, but only found footage and with clownvid. Yeah.
Well, the reason why I say that is like
found coofage.
Well, yeah, found coofage film, but like no, I think a fun way to look at it would be to analyze the
oh my god,
the impact of social distancing and self-isolation. It can be like a young woman who is alone and I'm working from home and I'm trying to make it do, and it's like a series of vignettes of her like recording doing stupid things, occasionally like a TikTok trend, and we slowly watch the life of her drain from her eyes.
Oh
we
man,
see her put on a little bit of weight, and then the last thing we see is a cop accidentally pressing the record face forward, recording, calling in the coroner that she took her own life.
Oh my god, that's incredible.
That would be a good COVID film. Will they ever make it? Fuck no.
No, they're never gonna make that one. They're never gonna make that one. That would be an amazing concept, though. I mean, it would be very tragic and terrible. But that was like there was a film I watched called The Last Call. I think it's on Tubi, where it was about this.
Everything you watch is on Tubi.
Yeah, I know. No, but someone mentioned the Wreck series.
I love those movies.
I binged all 4 of them.
The first 2 are so good.
Yeah, it's leagues above the English language equivalent with what's her name from, I forget her name.
The best English sort of like camera TV zombie thing I've ever seen is Dead Set.
Yes, that's the
Channel 4 Big Brother TV zombie movie.
Yeah,
it's so good. That would be a fun Halloween episode.
But the Wreck series, way better and more meaningful than what they did with Quarantine, which is what Quarantine's based off of the Spanish series Wreck. And all 4, like the third and the 4th film had its charm. The 3rd film was entirely needless with the wedding. But the first 2 of the Wreck series, that was like, I was shocked. And it was about like a demon virus. And oh my God, it was incredible. I highly recommend watching it. Because Quarantine, I liked it at the time. And I liked the second Quarantine film. But when I looked at the sort of spiritual implications of the original Spanish one, it was leagues better. But But anyways, no, that concept, Prude, that's terrifying. But nobody is ever going to make that film.
Well, I know. Isn't that tragic though?
Yeah,
That no one will.
I saw this found footage one on Tubi where it's about this English family where the husband slowly goes insane with like losing his livelihood and he ends up redacting his whole family. But like you could have something like that where she slowly slips into madness. And yeah, but anyways, moving on. I think we hit.
Do you want me to read?
Yeah. This is St. Thomas. Yeah.
This is why Thomas Aquinas and his masters, both Greeks and Christians, look with so little favor on the bourgeoisie, or the bourgeois, for they regarded money simply as an instrument and therefore held that the man who lives for money perverts the true order of life. Business, says Thomas Aquinas, considered in itself a certain baseness. Oh wow, that's where we get the crime of moral turpitude from. Inasmuch as it does not involve any honorable or necessary end. We find this criticism repeated at the time of the Renaissance by humanists like Erasmus. Indeed, it is the basis of that aristocratic prejudice against the bourgeois, in which which has never entirely disappeared, and which reappears in all sorts of forms, from sheer idealism to pure snobbery, in the most unlikely times and places. Thus, in the classical Marxian opposition of the bourgeois and the proletariat, is but one of a whole series of oppositions and class conflicts that rise, which the rise of the bourgeoisie has aroused. There is this aristocratic opposition of which I have just spoken. There is the opposition of the artist, which did so much as bring of the name bourgeois into disrepute in the 19th century. There is the opposition to the bourgeois insofar as he is the representation and incarnation of the money power, an opposition which has found a new expression in the social credit movement. That hasn't really gone away now, has it? Mm-hmm. And finally, there is opposition between the bourgeois and peasant, which is more fundamental and deep-rooted than any of them.
Well, it's very interesting how the artist class has been absorbed into the bourgeoisie like nothing else. I mean, even the sort of like debates over institutional critique is that's like, you know, gone by the wayside. I mean, by the time you get to nowadays with Banksy, it's over. Like, I hate to say, I mean, there still is an ability for, I think, the artist to break free of the money powers, but it's a very hard slog. And the professional art world, you know, I know it's kind of like a cliche thing to say, but it is true that the professional art world, you know, became this instrument of the sort of bourgeois ideology reflecting itself or critiquing itself, while ultimately still subsuming to the same economic relations, for lack of a better term, than, you know, yeah. So, also, I just realized where you said Thomas Aquinas instead of St. Thomas.
No, he's not a saint in my book. Not out of any disrespect to his.
No, I know the Orthodox
deal of works.
You don't recognize him as a
Yeah, it's post-schism.
But in my church, he's the official philosopher.
He is like your capital D doctor of the church outside of Jesus.
Yeah, exactly. So, anyways, would you see the Orthodox have a similar thing with?
Do you mean like the title doctor of the church?
Yes.
No, not really.
Oh
no, I mean like
there's important ones though. Like
yeah,
awesome.
I mean, well, the Orthodox Church. I mean, I guess like theologians. I mean, the Orthodox Church recognizes three: Saint John, the apostle and theologian; Saint Gregory, the theologian; and Saint Simeon, the new theologian. Although Saint Simeon had reposed over 1,000 years ago, so I guess you know that's what constitutes new these days in the Eastern Church.
Don't say Palamos, Gio.
I mean, a lot of people would consider him on that level of, I guess, theological. But I mean, like, there's
John Chrysostom is very important.
John Chrysostom is, I mean, both very important to us, but also to you guys. I mean, it's a priest.
Exactly.
Saint. And you also consider the Roman Catholic Church considers Saint John Chrysostom a doctor of the church. I just think it's a title. It's a Western title that we just the East Church doesn't use.
But with Thomas Aquinas, there's like,
I mean, there's no comparison.
There's very stark theological differences.
The volume of works that we have preserved of him. I mean, he just wrote more than any other man of his time.
Yeah, exactly. No, but I mean, like, there's very stark, contradictory theological disagreements.
Oh, of course, he wrote a
Thomism.
He wrote a whole thing. He wrote a whole thing called Against the Greeks.
Yeah, and like divine simplicity and you know, the Aristotle thing. But anyways, you'll summon Jay Dyer.
Oh God, no. We
moving
will.
on.
For the record, we will never have him on.
Really? Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, did he unfollow you too?
No, I'm not. I was never mutuals with him. I never followed him. I just
Oh,
find him incredibly abrasive.
that's what I mean. Like, I don't like I'm not knocking Jay Dyer, but I don't have that same character. Like, I mean, I think, you know, there's a lot of things I disagree with him on. There's a lot of things I agree with him on, but yeah, I don't know, man. Like, I've publicly spoken out against theology debates on the internet. I think like there is like someone asked me this on Substack. I think that there is a time and a place for theological debates, and I think that it can only come about from like a common or mutual understanding of, you know, you or two scholars having it out. But I think the
That's
vast
very
majority,
hard to find these days.
exactly, the vast majority of theological debates on the internet are probably not worth it and are probably just harmful. But anyways, yeah, name 5 books from Plato.
Can you name 5 books?
I'm not going to start off with the Republic.
Can you name 10 books?
The Timaeus.
Okay, can you name 5 books?
Phaedo, Protagoras, Phaedo, Laws.
Those are not a book.
The Republic.
Sorry, I'm sorry. I find that guy to be really funny.
What's his name?
Isn't he the one that
Etienne?
crashed the Game Awards and called himself like Bill Clinton's reformed rabbi or whatever?
What's that kid's name? Etienne or
Something like that.
Something like that. Remember Sam Hyde went on his show and he like, you know.
Yeah, I do.
He like broke through the kayfabe. Yeah, it's like
There was someone who was gonna do it. It was gonna be him.
Yeah, Matan Evan. There you go, Matan Evan. Yeah, dude, books. Dude, that was.
You read books.
That was almost like. That was almost the equivalent of Andrew Tate. Like, what color is your Bugatti? Like it was, and he was like saying it's some e-girl.
What's the name of your father?
Anyways, we find this criticism repeated at the time of the Renaissance by humanists like Erasmus. Indeed, it is the base of the aristocratic prejudice against the bourgeois, which has never entirely disappeared, which reappears in all sorts of forms, from sheer idealism to pure snobbery in the most unlikely times and places. Thus, the classical
I just read that, didn't I?
Oh, did you? The classic Marxism?
I left off at social.
Oh yeah, social credit movement. Yeah, there you go.
We finished there. Yeah, okay, we're start there.
Yeah, but while all these oppositions are real and each implies a genuine criticism of bourgeois culture, none of them is absolute or exhaustive. There is a more essential opposition still, which has been pointed out by Sorbet, which goes beyond economics and sociology to the bedrock of human nature. According to Sombert, the bourgeois type corresponds to certain definite psychological predispositions. In other words, there is such a thing as a bourgeois soul. It is rather than in economic circumstances, the whole development of the bourgeois culture finds its ultimate root. In the same way, the opposition pole to the bourgeois is not to be found in particular economic function of interest, which, I mean, that's basically against all of Marxism right there. And for instance, the proletarian or the peasant, but rather in the anti-bourgeois temperament, the type of character which naturally prefers to spend rather than to accumulate, to give rather than to gain. These types corresponds to Bergson's classification of the open and closed temperaments. And I guess Peterson would call it high agreeableness and high disagreeableness. Yeah, and they represent the opposite poles of human character and human experience. They are in eternal opposition to one another, and the whole character of a period or a civilization depends on which of the two predominates. Thus, we are led back from the external and material class conflict of the Marxians to a conception not far removed from that of St. Augustine. The two loves build two cities. The essential question is not the question of economics, but the question of love. Looking at the matter closely, writes Sombert, we get the impression that the opposition between these two fundamental types rests in the final analysis on an opposition of erotic life. For it is clear that this dominates the whole of human conduct as a superior and invisible power. The bourgeois and the erotic temperaments constitute so to speak, the two opposite poles of the world. Sombert's use of the word erotic is, of course, wider than the current English term. Unsatisfactory as the word erotic is the best we have, for charitable is even more miserably inadequate. Our bourgeois culture has reduced the heavenly flames of St. Paul's inspired speech to a dim bulb that is hardly strong enough to light a mother's meeting. So Sombert expressly distinguishes it from sensuality, which may be found in either of the two types of temperament. Indeed, the erotic type per excellence in Sombert's view is the religious mystic, the man of desire, like St. Augustine or St. Francis. And it's not the concupiscence of material bodily pleasure, obviously. Seen from this point of view, it is obvious that the Christian ethos is essentially anti-bourgeois, since it is an ethos of love. This is particularly obvious in the case of St. Francis and the medieval mystics, who appropriated to their use the phraseology of medieval erotic poetry and the use of the anti-bourgeois concept of the chivalrous class consciousness, such as Odell, noble, and Gentile, in order to define the spiritual character of true mystic. But it is no less clear in the case of the gospel itself. The spirit of, and this is also what Berdyaev also, he cites the gospels quite a lot. The spirit of the gospel is eminently that of the open type, which gives, asking nothing in return, and spends itself for others. It is essentially hostile to the spirit of calculation. That's very important right here, the spirit of calculation. The spirit of worldly prudence, and above all, the spirit of religious self-seeking and self-satisfaction. For what is the Pharisee but a spiritual bourgeois? A type of closed nature, a man who applies the principle of calculation and gain, or in other words, instrumental reason, not to economics but to religion itself. A hoarder of merits who reckons his accounts with heaven as though God was his banker. It is against this closed, self-sufficient moralist ethic that the fierce denunciations of the Gospels are directed. Even the sinner who possesses a seed of generosity, a faculty of self-surrender, and an openness of spirit is nearer to the kingdom of heaven than the religious Pharisee. For the soul that is closed to love is closed to grace. And that's funny. I was actually watching one of these Sopranos analysis videos where it was talking about Paulie Gautieri, where he views, it was called Paulie Gautieri and these mystical experiences he has, or these religious epiphanies. And he sort of views his relation to the Catholic Church as a protection racket, which is when Mikey Palmise comes back to haunt him, he realizes the church didn't protect him, and he's like, I can't believe it. I paid you all this money over the years. So it's Paulie wanted a spiritual indulgence to protect him from the former mafia.
From PTSD.
Yeah. Or he tried to grift down. He was doing the St. Ignatius parade or whatever. I think it was St. Ignatius. And the Catholic Church
Which
wanted
one?
him. Yeah, it was in Newark, and he yeah. So he wanted to just pay his usual $10,000 that came from Johnny Boy way back in the day. And the church's well, we think $50,000 is a better sum. And he's and the top comment on this Sopranos clip was Paulie thought that he could he could basically pull a scam on an organization that's been an Italian organization that's been around for 2,000 years. It's it's so funny. The church is out grifting the mafia. It's something inherently hilarious, especially when you're Italian yourself. There's something very hilarious about that. But no, but that's a very important point, though. The bourgeois spirit is one of instrumental reason and calculation and material comfort. And this is something that Berdyaev stresses over and over again in his extended essay. And I think that spirit has utterly poisoned every single relation of life. And it's sort of, and I think people that should have been the sort of heirs of tradition, which is the conservative political movements in Europe and in the Anglosphere in particular, they have fundamentally destroyed their mandate by essentially giving way to this Milton Friedman free to choose capitalist what's the other Friedman? Thomas Friedman? He called them, or was it Krugman that called them market fundamentalists?
Well, no, there is a Thomas Friedman who writes for the New York Times.
Well, they both write for the New York Times.
Yeah, they both do. Yeah.
I think it was Krugman that called them market fundamentalists, which is sort of like woke more correct point, like they are. And I think like the heirs and the stewards of, like, you have to realize, like, from the perspective of Christopher Dawson here, the English conservative tradition is a much older one. And the English conservative tradition that produced great minds like Michael Oakeshott, like, that was completely corrupted in the 19th and 20th century. Like, they became the janissaries of the moneyed powers. And the American Republican Party is like this. The Conservative Party in Canada is like this. I'd imagine it's the same in Australia. Although in Australia, they have a different history because a lot of them would be considered racist nowadays. But like, but nevertheless, like the modern Tory Party, I mean, come on, you forget about it, right? So it's very funny how like the tradition of Anglosphere conservatism, and to a lesser extent in Germany, becomes the bourgeois mind turned inwards, turned into a very simplistic reification of itself, to where like capitalism produces all goods. But it's like when the conservative talks about capitalism and material wealth, like, in a lot of ways they don't realize, like, this is unfortunately with libertarians, they don't realize that, I mean, it's not to say that people have to go back to being poor or whatever, but like, in a lot of ways, like, that material wealth or the obsession over that material wealth produced a lot, or rather aided a lot of modern ills that the Anglosphere conservative, like, somewhat says they oppose. And then, in recent history, people like James Lindsay come about, and they make it easier for people. I know, like, I know DA has devolved into like, here's the Bash James Lindsay hour, but like, it's, it's kind of true, right? Like, they've made it easier. People like James Lindsay and like, they made it easier by just basically reifying what they are actually protecting, what they mean by telling the left to stop. They mean that telling the left to stop robbing me, but I'm also going to rob you. But it's like, if you get robbed, it's cool because you weren't productive enough. And it's like, okay. It's very funny. I mentioned that book by Zbigniew Brzezinski. It's called Between Two Worlds, the Technomic Society. And he said that, like, after FDR, conservatives were like totally neutered from responding to the New Deal society. And they still, to this day, like, languish in these like weird bourgeois intellectual pretensions that were coming from people like William F. Buckley. But that didn't really get them anywhere. And it also instantiated something I probably shouldn't talk about for various reasons, but like, it instantiated a hatred of like lower class Americans and lower class Canadians and like the little Englander gammon. And so it created this thesis of like, there's two types of European people. There's like lower class people that we are like, that are, whatever. And there's like this very like bourgeois intellectual pretension that people like William F. Buckley in America cultivated. And, even here in Canada, it's the same way. Like, even Fortisac said this recently, like, these people, like, they hate like lower class Canadians more than anything. Like, they hate them even more than, like recent immigrants, right? Like, it's a very interesting thing. But when you look at it from that lens of the quantitative mind, then you can see the subversion of the conservative movement in the Anglosphere. And anyways,
yeah, no disagreements there.
But I mean, what's the way out of it? Like, it seems that
well, that becomes the chief question, right?
Yeah.
This is the one that everyone has sort of been trying to figure out.
Well, I said this with
how do we escape, right? Or better yet, how do we come out of where we are at now? And I mean, this is where everyone's fighting over is it like post-liberalism? Are we going to enter like a post-Christian state, or like a post, like, or someone arguing for multipolarity or whatever? I mean, like, you're going to get a million different answers from a million different people if you ask.
Yeah.
But I mean, everyone has kind of fundamentally come to the question of like and I mean, this is the thing too, when you read even like the Enlightenment thinkers, none of these guys would ever tell you sell your nation up the river for third world migration. Like, even in the American tradition, as young as it is, like, even, I hate to sound edgy, but like up until about 100 years ago, prior to the Second World War, like Lothrop Stoddard would be considered by all means a progressive for his time.
Well, I mean, even the residential school system was considered progressive.
And even the residential school system was considered a progressive humanitarian.
Not to say endorse, but like,
considered a progressive humanitarian, endeavor. And that no longer exists.
Well, like, even the eugenics movement was a progressive.
It was. And I know I know that that's a bit controversial, or I guess edgy to say, but like, yes, it was. And I don't know what else to say on that front other than like, hey, haven't we had this like kind of debate or discussion before?
Nothing's new under the sun. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's very clear if we want to go open our scripture, but at the same time, right, it's just like everyone's now debating on what that's going to look like or what will come from it, right? And you're left pondering, well, the fundamental degree of material comfort that previous generations had, right? Like, this is why, like, a lot of people will like lambast the wife guy or whatever, which I think is true. There's a lot of good reasons to lambast it, but like some of it's very cringe because like your children will not have the same quality of life that you will, and odds are you don't have the same quality of life and material comfort your parents did. And even if you do, you're working 3 times as hard.
You have to work 3 times as hard for what was considered normal a generation ago.
Yeah. And on top
that's
of all
everything, that's for like a quality part.
No, I agree. It's just
you know who said that recently? Davis Arini got his YouTube channel back.
Really?
And he said this in his recent video. Yeah. Oh man, Davis Arini.
Darned.
Yeah, I can't believe it.
But I say all this just to point out, like, one, I really don't like the like sort of social downward mobility porn, whether it's like tiny houses or like Hickman-esque homesteading posts, or more recently but I mean, like, the consequences of things getting materially and also just politically worse has been the idealization of the return to the 90s, right? Like, I wish to return to 1990s material conditions.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, why? Well, 1, it was better. 2, it was safer. 3 was like just more politically sane and didn't seem like we were getting screwed over. I mean, we already were, but things were better back then. And you can kind of point to a myriad of metrics and be like, yeah, things were better on these markers that I find to be important. And so it's just like, yeah, guys, I know a lot of younger guys out there, and we have mutuals that are the same way, that are like, look, man, if I could even secure half of what my parents had at this age, I would consider that a victory under current conditions.
Yeah.
And it's just like, so that to go back earlier to the essay, right? Like that sort of that peasant versus the bourgeois, like that's still here and alive in America too. Like, we talked about this on American Spirits a while back, like the frontier, and I don't want to call them peasants, but in a lot of way they were, because they had to like survive on their own. There was no state really to support them. And you had
some of the accounts of them were incredible. They didn't even have roofs on their houses. Yeah,
that too. But also, like, as Jackson notes in his essays, like, this is where that frontier contribution to democracy comes in, because it's this populist us versus them, that the haves versus the have-nots, the moneyed coastal interest versus the frontier men trying to make do, wanting to pass like the Homestead Act or whatever, or even Jacksonian democracy. And it's something that we don't acknowledge having its K line all the way into the present day, and it's certainly there here.
Yeah. But let me ask you though, like, before we move on, like, as an American yourself, like as someone whose family's been in America since pretty much the beginning, or at least parts of your family, like, what is it about the American spirit that has essentially, I mean, nowadays I think talking about class is very obscure because there are people that have wealth that are in such a high margin that the average person cannot conceive of it. Like nobody can really conceive of like how rich Sam Altman is, for example. But like, what is it about America in terms of the culture and in terms of even maybe not the economics, but certainly in terms of the social structure that is like this class destroying machine to where like, is it just because the bourgeois mentality was instantiated by those original like Puritans and Anabaptists and so forth that founded America, or is it?
I think it's more recent than that.
But on the frontier, though, was there a lack?
Well,
of
on the frontier, there's a
classification
totally
now?
different attitude because you're forced to hold off on your own, and also
Right.
you're forced to trust that everyone can defend themselves, or also that justice is going to be expedited in certain
Like
ways.
like Scandinavian communitarianism, like because of such a harsh condition, they had to have that spirit.
And I mean, there's different waves of settlement as well. Like when we say like Frederick Jackson Turner's The Significance of the Frontier in American History, it's a series of essays that dictate every single point in time, from like trying to get the charter passed to the navigation acts even prior to the revolution, to the phases of what we would call the Midwest, to the Missouri and Kansas territories,
Panhandle,
and then later on further westward until the frontier is considered closed by 1898. So I mean, there's different evolutions of it, but I mean, I think the biggest thing about it that you can take away from it that still exists even to today is that everyone knows when it doesn't take you can be a yokel, and I say that I don't mean that to be derogatory, but you can be a yokel and know that like, oh, the rich guy who lives closer to the state capital has a greater ability to screw me over than my local like state rep does, who gets there by horse. You know, like, and that still exists today where, yeah, like everyone who gets into Congress becomes super rich. But like the guy who lives in Kansas knows that his representative doesn't mean jack shit compared to the guy who represents Dallas Fort Worth, right? So I mean, those are all still there.
That's probably like why Pennsylvania is like such a historically important state in America, because it's like the gateway to the Appalachians, the Midwest, the North, Canada, New York City. Like it's a very interesting location in America, right? Like that's why a lot of like crazy stuff happens in Pennsylvania and Ohio, and I mean certain parts of the Midwest are like totally neglected, obviously, but like when was America considered full? Like when was the frontier considered fully closed?
If I recall correctly, it's either 1896 or 1898 is when the frontier line, this census marker, is considered closed.
When did California become a state?
Oh, I want to say that's a great question. Hold on, I think they just had their 150th anniversary, 1850. So no, more than 150 years.
So yeah, but geographically, the frontier extends to California, or
well, graphically, the frontier line was just considered a line in which you could measure. I think it was like X number of square miles and how many settlements were per there, and I think it was just a number of less than 2,000 persons. But I mean, you can go listen to the episode on it. I mean, we cover the whole book and the various essays inside.
With Bagby?
No. Ryan, Turnipseed, myself, and Charlemagne covered.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But I mean, Bagby and I have covered the issue of the frontier and what it means, because what Jackson laments in one of his towards the end of his essays, where he's writing later in his life, he kind of laments. He's like, well, now that the frontier is closed, you sort of have these Atlantic interests that are looking to expand elsewhere. Into the Pacific and into Central and South America. And this becomes a through line that like William Appleman Williams writes about in Empire's A Way of Life, where he's like, well, the frontier closed, and so American expansionism continues with the open door policy towards China, and then it's kind of been a runaway game ever since. And I don't know how accurate that is.
Yeah, didn't they want to grow tobacco in South America or something like that?
Well, also there was debates about wanting to use just to settle it and filibuster it for your own purposes. So, for instance, one of the earliest debates over the Monroe Doctrine is President Polk saying, like, we should use the Monroe Doctrine to help these white settlers in the Yucatan Peninsula from being ethnically cleansed by the natives.
Oh my God!
It's a wild time, and that's
Wasn't
still
the argument for Texas though, and
well, no, not really, because the Mexicans invite
they paid them
Anglos
to,
Well, they invite them to, because they're like, well, we don't want to deal with it, and also we don't want to deal with the Indians. There's a reason why outside of a few major trade route areas, like those areas are basically empty. And the reason why is because you are going to get scalped and murdered in the most brutal way possible if you get caught. So things to consider.
Sort of like parts of New Zealand when it was colonized. Yeah.
So I mean, and eventually they push to secede, war breaks out, revolution, etc. I should do a whole episode on the Texas Revolution with Bagby. That'd be a good time.
I just imagine like that one time Alex Jones, I forget who was, I think he was mad at Greg Abbott or somebody. This was years ago. It's like, you don't mix with Texas, boy. Like that was like, has there ever been a more Texas figure than Alex Jones? Debatable. But anyways, moving on. Do you want to continue reading, Prude?
Yeah, I can read away. Yeah. Where did we leave off of?
Here you go.
Okay. In the same way, the ethos of the gospel is sharply opposed to the economic view of life and the economic virtues. It teaches man to live from day to day without taking thought for their material needs, for a man's life does not consist in the abundance of things which he possesses. Even condemns the prudent forethought of the rich man who plans for the future. Thou fool, this night do they require thy soul of thee, and who shall those things be which thou hast provided? So long as the Christian ideal was supreme, it was difficult for the bourgeois spirit to assert itself true, as Sombart insists. The bourgeois class and the bourgeois view of life had already made its appearance in medieval Europe, but as powerful as they were, especially in the Italian cities, they always remained limited to a part of life and failed to dominate the whole society or inspire civilization with their spirit. It was not until the Reformation had destroyed the control of the Roman Church over social life in Northern Europe that we find a genuine bourgeois culture emerging. And whatever we may think of Max Weber's thesis regarding the influence of Reformation and the origins of capitalism, we cannot deny the fact that bourgeois culture had culturally developed on Protestant soil, especially in a Calvinist environment, while the Catholic environment seemed decidedly unfavorable to its evolution.
Yeah, that's true. And you could see like the connection there with the general ethos of Protestantism and the different like class orientations of people that were taken in by the Reformation. Like that's, yeah, I mean, it's a very complicated topic, and I'm sure people that are well aware of the histories of Protestantism in Europe and America could analyze that. But Weber's thesis, I think, some people say he missed certain elements, but yeah, it's nevertheless, there is something to the Protestant work ethic and so on and so forth. Yeah,
I would agree wholeheartedly. Yeah. It is indeed impossible to find a more complete example in the history of the opposition of Sombart's two types than in the contrast of culture of the Counter-Reformation lands with that of 17th century Holland and 18th century England and Scotland in North America. The Baroque culture of Spain and Italy and Austria is the complete social embodiment of Sombart's erotic type. It is not that it was a society of nobles and peasants and monks and clerics which centered in its palaces and monasteries, or even palace monasteries like the Escorial, left a comparatively small place to the bourgeois and the merchant. It is not merely that it was uneconomic culture, which spent its capital lavishly, recklessly, and splendidly, whether to the glory of God or for the adornment of human life. It was rather that the whole spirit of the culture was passionate and ecstatic, and finds its supreme expressions in art and music and religious mysticism. We only have to compare Bernini with the brothers Adam or Saint Teresa and Hannah More to feel the difference in the spirit and the rhythm of the two cultures. The bourgeois culture has its mechanical rhythm of a clock, Baroque the musical rhythm of a fugue or sonata.
Well, that's a great point, because when you look at the economic relations of, for example, the Italian city-states, parts of Holland that were Catholic, parts of, well, up until, a certain point, England was highly Catholic, right? Yes. But you look at the church as a huge economic but in terms of not just economics, but social legitimacy as being a huge counterweight to the moneyed classes. Now, there was a lot of economic corruption in the church, let's be real here. And there was a lot of moral and economic corruption with Rome. I mean, Luther was correct about a lot of things in terms of the church of that day. But in terms of the artisan classes, to which you would also include painters, sculptors, stonemasons, so on and so forth, the church had a viable counterweight of patronage that directly contradicted the spirit of the bourgeois in a lot of places where, I mean, this even is reflected in, for example, the artwork of the Scandinavians that were heavily Protestantized, as opposed to Renaissance Catholic Italy. I mean, I am quite a fan of a lot of Northman art. I mean, people say, I mean, my good friend of me, Paul Talk, says I paint like a Northman, which is funny because the filmmaker Stan Brockage, he did this paper on the Canadian Group of Seven, and he said that a lot of art critics would compare them to painters like Edvard Munch, and there's something there, right? Of course, there was actually, people don't know this, but there was a lot of Scandinavians in Canada at the time as well. But so that provided this huge cultural and social and even economic counterweight to a full bourgeoisiefication, if you will. I know if ification has become like this Reddit buzz term, but it's, I do like saying it. But there was something there. I mean, ultimately, in the hindsight of the 21st century, everything's become bourgeois. Like, let's be real. Even Italy, so even the Catholic Church has subsumed itself into a position of demure bourgeois public-private morality distinction, right? Like the public-private sphere. Whereas I could say that, a noble thing about the Orthodox Church is that in a lot of its cultural contexts in Eastern Europe, and to a lesser extent in Greece, they have maintained an integration into public life that you could find in Italy in the Catholic Church. Up until very recently, you found in Ireland. But in the rest of the Catholic world, I mean, I shouldn't say that because a lot of places in South America and Africa, they have a very different understanding of the secular public-private distinction. But in North America and Western Europe, I mean, the Catholic Church has went along with it, unfortunately. So it's a matter of private life. And there was a lot of people after Vatican II that said, well, maybe that's a good thing because maybe we shouldn't rock the boat anymore. And so I don't know, I would have to get someone who's more learned in sort of Catholic social relations, than I am. But I noticed that even the Catholic Church has retreated into private life rather than public life. I mean, that's an obvious thing. So, yeah.
Do you want to take over?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so the ideal of the bourgeois culture is to maintain a respectable average standard. Its maxims are, and here's where you get managerialism. Its maxims are: honesty is the best policy. Do as you would be done by. The great happiness of the greatest number. But the Baroque spirit lives in for triumphant moments of creative ecstasy. It will have all or nothing. Its maxims are: all for love in the world we well lost. Nada, nada, nada. What dost thou seek for, O my soul? All is thine, all is for thee. Do not take less, nor rest with the crumbs that fall from the table of thy father. Go forth and exult in thy glory, hide thyself in and rejoice, and thou shalt obtain all the desires of thy heart. The conflict between those two ideals of life and the forms of culture runs through the whole history of Europe, and from the Reformation to the Revolution, and finds its political counterpart in the struggle between Spain and the Protestant powers. It's hardly too much to say that if Philip II had been victorious over the Dutch and the English and the Huguenots, modern bourgeois civilization would never have developed, and capitalism, insofar as it existed, would have acquired an entirely different complexion. That's funny how capitalism dissolved the power of the Catholic Church more than any rival religious sects when you really think about it. The same spirit would have ruled at Amsterdam as at Antwerp, as at Berlin, as at Munich, in North America as in South. And thus the moment where Alexander Frens turned back a dying man from his march on Paris might be regarded as one of the greatest turning points in world history. Even so, it is quite conceivable that Europe might have fallen into two closed worlds, as alien and opposed to one another as Christendom and Islam, had it not been that neither culture was strong enough to assimilate France. For a time during the first half of the 17th century, the Counter-Reformation and its culture carried everything before them, but the bourgeois spirit in France was already too strong as to be eliminated, and it allied itself with the monarchy and the Galician church against the ultramontane Catholicism and Baroque culture. And then, of course, fast forward to the French Revolution. I mean, would you consider the French Revolution a bourgeois social movement? I mean, obviously. But I wonder if there's a debate there. Yeah.
It's certainly, if you want to listen to Zoomer Schopenhauer and I talk about the French Revolution covering Goldstone's book, Revolution Rebellion, it's more complicated than either left-wing or right-wing political narratives like to give it credit for, which is...
It was the beginning of the end, man!
Well, there's also a boatload of demographic time bombs that were just bound to go off. And then, of course, physical, really piss poor management.
Yeah, and geographic time bombs in terms of crop yields and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
What were all the crops? They were dying of ergot?
There was a famine, yeah.
Yeah, and people were getting ergot poisoning, and that had like hallucinatory effects. I mean, ergot was... I believe that's how Albert Hoffman synthesized lysergic acid, was from ergot, from wheat. So, anyways, but yeah, I think it's more complicated than what people in the 2010s, like reactionaries online, they would like read a few essays by de Maistre, and they're like, "See the French Revolution? That's what the beginning and the end." So, although the classicists in the Galician culture of the age of Louis XIV was far from behind being genuinely bourgeois, it contained a considerable bourgeois element and owed a great deal to men of bourgeois class and bourgeois spirit, such as Beaulieu, Nicole, and even perhaps Bossuet himself. The resultant change in the spirit of French religion and culture is to be seen in the retreat of the mystics, of which Bittermond speaks, and the victory of a rather hard and brilliant nationalism, which prepared the way for rationalism of the Enlightenment. And so that's why even like nationalism, I know that online tradcaths in the 2010s, before it became like nationalism became like a sacrosanct word in online spaces, a lot of them did like say that, no, I'm not a nationalist. Like nationalism is modernist and so on and so forth. But unfortunately, that discourse, outside of the context of what was happening in France and in Europe at the time, to say that nationalism is modernism, the way that, like, for example, the book Imagined Communities, I think like that does unfortunately play into like leftist narratives about nationalism. And there is a case to be made that even the ancient regime had a sense of nationalistic pride. But I know that discourse was very in vogue among like tradcaths in the 2010s. So I think even like Adrian Vermeule wrote against nationalism at that time.
I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know enough on that issue with regards to traditional Catholicism on that front. I'm not going to put too much commentary on it.
Well, aren't we just old tea-slurs, old tea coolers? Old head coolers. Thus, French 18th century culture became open door through which the bourgeois spirit penetrated the closed world of Baroque Catholicism. Excuse me. First as a leaven of criticism and new ideas, and finally as a destructive flood of revolutionary change, which destroyed the moral and social foundations of the Baroque culture. And this right here is the basis of a lot of 20th and now 21st century tradcath criticism of the Enlightenment right here. So from everyone from Vermeule to Berdyaev to Lash to Conquistador Crusader 88 on Twitter, they all have this similar criticism. So yeah. The uneconomic character of the cultural left is powerless that culture left is powerless to withstand the highly organized financial power of new commercialist bourgeois society, to which also you could say the Catholic Church, especially in recent years, has succumbed to this power. It went in the same way that the Hellenistic world succumbed to the superior organization of Roman imperialism. Nevertheless, it did not succumb without a struggle. For whatever the common people possessed, the power of organization and the means of defense, and whatever the religious tradition of the Counter-Reformation had struck deep roots in the soil, they fought with desperate resolution and heroism in defense of the old Church Catholic order. As in La Vendée in 1793, in Tyrol, how do you pronounce that, Prude? Tyrol in
Sure.
1809, and in the Basque provinces till later in the 19th century. But then, I mean, a lot of Basques became communists, though, but I think that's because they did have like a nationalistic collectivist identity, right? So like Basque communism is different than a lot of, a lot of communisms of the 20th century. So with the passage of the Baroque culture, a vital element went out of Western civilization, where its traditions survived in the 19th century, as in Austria and Spain and parts of Italy and southern Germany. One still feels that life has a richer savor and more vital rhythm than in the lands where the bourgeois spirit is triumphant. Unfortunately, the breach with the past seems too great for Europe to recover this lost tradition, even when the bourgeois civilization is decadent and exhausted. Men looked for an alternative, not to the human culture of the immediate Catholic past, but to the inhuman mass civilization of Russia or the barbaric traditions of German paganism. Well, again, these are Catholic writers, so yeah. Well, in our own country, we are abandoning the competitive selfishness of the older capitalism only to adopt a bourgeois version of socialism, like you mentioned, Prude, the Fabians, right? Which is inspired by a humanitarian policy of social reform derived from the liberal democratic tradition. It aims not at the proletarian revolutionary idea of the communists, but rather at the diffusion of the bourgeois standards of life and culture among the whole population, the universalizing the bourgeois rentier type. And also you could include the new left subversion of the communist left in North America as well. You could include that into this analysis. Very interesting stuff here. But I mean, yeah, that's like, I know he's like bashing Germanic paganism, but to which I think to Dawson, that's a shorthand for the Austrian painter, obviously. But, yeah. But I think like that's a very good picture of what the Catholic thought at this time was, right? So, I mean, you gotta realize like the Cold War was more or less going on in the mid 80s as well. So, we don't have a little bit left.
Okay.
Whatever may be the future of these movements, there can be little doubt that they make an important change in the history of the bourgeois civilization, and the age of the free and triumphant progress of Western capitalism is ended. Capitalism may well survive, before the sun explodes, but it will be a controlled and socialized capitalism, which aims rather at maintaining the general standard of life than at the reckless multiplication of wealth by individuals. Well, I think he was wrong about that. I mean, I think we still have the reckless multiplication of wealth by individuals more than ever. So, yet the mere slowdown of the tempo of economic life, the transformation of capitalism from a dynamic to a static form, like again, the Marxists were correct here. Capitalism will stagnate into just protecting wealth rather than generating new wealth. Will not in itself change the spirit of our civilization, even if it involves the passing of the bourgeois type in its classical 19th century form. It may only substitute a post-bourgeois type, which is no less dominant by economic motives, though it is more mechanized and less dominated by the competitive spirit. It may not be so, as many critics of English society suggest, the bourgeois capitalist order in a senile and decadent form. I guess the popular Substack term is sclerotic, right?
I guess
as
so.
As we have already pointed out, the character of a culture is determined not so much by its form of economic organization as by the spirit which dominates it. Socialization and the demand for a common standard of economic welfare, however justly it may be, do not involve a vital change in the spirit of a culture. And this is where you get like the predominant secular cultural left of the 21st century, right? They don't believe that there's a spirit of the culture that needs to be changed, because that's evil and bad and trad and bad old times. Even a proletarian culture of the communist type, in spite of its avowed hatred of the bourgeois and all its works, is post-bourgeois rather than anti-bourgeois. Its spiritual element is a negative one. the spirit of revolution. And when the work of destruction is accomplished, it will inevitably tend to fall back into the traditions of the bourgeois culture, as it appears to be happening in Russia at present. Although I would say the history of post-Soviet Russia complicates this, but whatever. Thus,
no, this is before the fall of the Soviet Union, so it's a little...
Yeah, this is before Putin and, Yeltsin. Thus, while Western communism is still highly idealistic and represents a spiritual protest against the bourgeois spirit and a reaction against the victorious individual capitalism of the immediate past, Russian communism is actually doing for Russia what the Industrial Revolution did for Western Europe. And it's attempting to transform a peasant people into a modern urban industrial society. And that's why, like, you even have like right-wing types in North America at the time that would rather side with the Soviet Union over, like, the decadent West. No economic challenge will suffice to change the spirit of a culture. So long as the proletariat is governed by purely economic motives, he remains a bourgeois at heart. It is only in religion that we shall find a spiritual force that can accomplish a spiritual revolution. The true opposition to the bourgeois is not to be found in the communist, but in the religious man, the man of desire. The bourgeois must be, and notice how it's different than the material desire, the Cucupsians, so I am mispronouncing that word, of bourgeois capitalism. The bourgeois must be replaced not so much by another class, but by another type of humanity. It is true that the passing of the bourgeois does involve the coming of the worker, and there can be no question of a return to the old regime of privileged castes. Well, we'll see. We'll see. Where Marx was wrong was not in his dialectic of social change, but in the narrow materialism of his interpretation, which ruled out the religious factor. Thus, the fact is that Marx was himself a disgruntled bourgeois, and his doctrine of historical materialism is hung over from a debauch of a bourgeois economics and bourgeois philosophy. And that's why liberalism and Marxism, they do share a lot of common assumptions. Let's skip ahead. In the respect of Marxian socialism is infinitely inferior to the old utopian socialism, for St. Simon and his followers, with all of their extravagances, had at least grasped this essential truth. They failed not because they were too religious, but because they were not religious enough, and mistook the shadows of idealism for the realities of genuine religion. And of course, you have, in liberation theology, this common blunder that was repeated, the old socialism of the Catholic Church that was there, the socialist element, that was unfortunately repeated by liberation theology as well, to where they abandoned their religiosity a lot of times. Today, Christians are faced with no less heavy responsibility. There's always a temptation for religion to ally with its existing order. And if we today ally ourselves with the bourgeois because the enemies of the bourgeois are often the enemies of the church, we shall be repeating the mistakes of the Galician prelates made in the time of Louis. The Christian church is the organ of the spirit, the predestined channel through which the salvic energy of divine love flows out and transforms humanity. But it depends on the Christians of a particular generation, both individually and corporately, whether this source of spiritual energy is brought into contact with the life of humanity and the needs of contemporary society. We can hoard our treasure, we can bury our talent to the ground like the man in the parable who thought that his master was an austere man who feared to take risks. Or, on the other hand, we can choose the difficult and hazardous way of creating spiritual activity, which is the way of the saints. If the age of the martyr has not yet come, the age of the limited self-protective bourgeois religion is over. The kingdom of heaven suffers violence, and the violent takes it by force. And that is the problem, because the bourgeois spirit has fundamentally polluted the religious spirit as well. And we're left with what even Nietzsche predicted as the death of God and the last man, which is heavily the sort of what Nietzsche talked about in a sort of non-Marxist critique of that bourgeois spirit, which is like the little comforts by day, the little comforts at night, so yeah, that's a very cogent analysis there. But what do you think about that, Prude?
It's the unfortunate part that so much has been sided with the powers that be, or the contemporary order of our time. It just illustrates that, at least for And I can't say that the Catholic Church isn't without power, but it certainly is sided with things that I at least personally feel are antithetical to what the church has taught.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah.
At least what is even proclaimed in the gospel. And it just leaves, I think, for a lot of faithful Catholics in a weird position, because there's a lot of money changers that need to be thrown out. And there's a very much a bourgeois mindset that exists inside the ecclesiastical hierarchy that has unfortunately been tempted by the riches of this world. And I'm reminded of like 2 Timothy, where Paul's writing in prison and he's about to be offered up as a sacrifice. And he writes to Timothy, he's just like, those around me have abandoned me because they loved the world more than the gospel. Luke alone is with me, And that's the case, that there's this bourgeois mindset inside both. And I mean, it's not just the Catholic Church. It unfortunately infects all facets of Christianity, where ecclesiastical structures and faulty presbyters and hierarchy have chosen for the powers that be rather than for the message of Jesus Christ, which is tragic. But however, I think that I don't want to say relax, it's priced in, but in a way it is sort of built into the Christian eschatology of how things fall away. But the gates of hell won't prevail against it. And that gives me a small hope, but nevertheless, it calls upon all faithful to stand against things that are ungodly and improper.
Well, I mean, I know like a tradcath criticism of orthodoxy is that they were too beholden to the state, Caesaropapism. That was like a big debate in the 2010s between like orthobros and Catholic tradcaths online. But at the same time, like, not to like reify it, because I do know that like in places like Russia and in Eastern Europe in general, like they do have a lot of their own problems. But it does seem like, and like, let's be real, there was like a lot of subversion by the Soviets within the Orthodox Church. But like, it does seem that they had a very different relation to faith and public life because of that than the Catholic Church, being an organization that stood outside of temporal and worldly powers in Europe, and
but
North
still
America.
Possessing temporal authority.
Exactly, and being corrupted by the temporal authority. But at the same time, the debate is, if the church does not have temporal authority, like the church has less temporal authority than it's ever had in its history, then look what's happened, right? But when in the Orthodox context, there is a fundamentally different relation, because a lot of these bourgeois ideals did not take hold in Eastern Europe. And so, I mean, it's complicated. Like, there's problems in both churches, but I think that, like, I'm personally am not a sedevacantist. Like, I don't think that, like, Vatican II, like, destroyed the legacy of the popes or whatever. But I do think that Vatican II, I mean, certain things may well have been necessary. I want to tread carefully here without offending people. But it did fundamentally change the church's relation to worldly power. That goes with it. Like, I don't think that's a controversial take. Because I think that bourgeois mindset had fundamentally taken hold in Europe, North America, and really throughout the world, to where, and especially like the communist threat made the church at the time look at itself and like, well, are we better off with commissars? Or are we better off with like liberal technocrats? And it was a very unfortunate position. And I think, like, unfortunately, especially in North America, as we've talked about, with Catholic intellectuals who pulled their weight far above their numbers in terms of the population in America, specifically, the conservative intellectual movement in the 20th century was largely predominated by Catholics. I mean, there was a lot of Protestants. There was a lot of, people of another faith as well. I don't think I can say on YouTube, but like, there was a lot of non-Protestant intellectuals that were in America, right? I mean, William F. Buckley being an example. So I think, unfortunately, I think even other people in our spheres talked about this. Unfortunately, anti-communism did serve to, in a way, make a deal with the Catholic Church in terms of worldly power. And when communism in the Soviet world fell, the Catholic Church was sort of left holding a bag. And it's like, there's something tragic about that. in a way, a lot of people in these think tanks in North America, they realized that, well, the new left was way more of a subversive force to communism than like these old stodgy McCarthyite Cold Warriors on the political right. And I think even a lot of like people on the far right at the time, as people like Thomas have pointed out, like they were like, well, I guess, you know, the cultural transformation in North America and in Europe is Western Europe is way more impactful than even Soviet communism. And so you have like figures on the far right, people who were fans of the Austrian painter were like, well, you know, I guess like communism's by a little bit of a degree better. Not to say I endorse that view, but I think that Catholic intellectuals in North America were already in a very precarious situation. So the fact that they became Cold Warriors, not to say that like I'm sure like me and you, Prude, would be against, of course, you know, like, I mean, communism was an existential threat, you know, but in hindsight, there was a very complicated relationship, as there was a very complicated relationship to Catholicism as it is regarded to America in general. And so, but in Western Europe as well. I mean, people talk about Operation Gladio, for instance, and stuff like that. But yeah, but like at this time, I mean, it seems that like what he said about the left, though, about communism and revolutionary socialism, that they too would fall into a form of bourgeois thinking that may be a bit more humanitarian, that may be a bit more socialistic, but bourgeois nevertheless. I think that's a pretty apt criticism. And I think that people like Berdyaev and Christopher Dawson and Kondylis being thinkers, well, Kondylis wasn't Catholic, but like being thinkers that are examining class distinctions outside of the Marxist tradition, I think in a lot of ways gives them a clarity of thinking that isn't beholden to this other tradition that by every metric pretty much has failed. So unless you're like, I don't know, Logo Daedalus or whoever, where it's like, you know, communism didn't fail. It's just the Chinese perfected it. So, you know, yeah. You see that, you know, you see that the Chinese, they like carve through whole mountains. You see that, Prude? They had, like,
I no, I haven't seen it, but I mean, cool. We did that too, I guess.
No, but it's like cut off, like you had like a giant laser that just like cut through the mountain and like they have a rail line.
Well, I don't know if they did a giant laser.
No, they didn't. I mean, they did it because they have so much money that they can do these, like,
okay, they're doing industrial works projects that we had done in the 20th and 19th centuries. Like, okay.
Yeah, but it's cool because
I don't know what to make of it other than just
Prude, it's got neon lights.
Yay,
it's got neon
cool.
lights.
All right, I guess I okay.
Did Carnegie and Rockefeller have neon lights?
Please get to the super chats.
No, but my point, Prude, is that that's like totally antithetical to the Chinese spirit of, for example, Taoism, where you do not carve through the mountain, you work with the mountain. You know what I mean? Like the uncarved block. Like, but it's just no.
But Carnegie, I think the need to make a highway or whatever is going to take precedence.
Yeah. No, but I thought like all these like China boos, they were like, oh my God, they carved right through the mountain and it's got neon lights. It's a train with neon lights through the mountain. And it's like, China economy strong. I hope people get that urgent reference. I love when he does those videos where he's like, China economy strong. All right, let's get to the super chats. This has been a very depressing stream, but also a very illuminating stream. So, yeah, all right. Let's go to Entropy first. And here we have Entropy. And please need those super chats. Here's your last chance. Melissa for $10. Never lose your passion, Gio. Thank you, Melissa. And we have our good friend Sex Freakman for $5. I am once again relaying a message for Michael Hassler. Is there any chance you'll cover The Crowd, A Study of the Popular Mind by Gustave Le Bon, or this?
I've read that book.
Yeah, that's actually a really great book. I heard
That might be a future Dyer episode.
Yeah, maybe Prude will cover it. With dimes. Or this hoe got roaches in her crib by Quad Mills.
I've said before, I said like 20 episodes ago, someone should pay Gio $100 to review Quan Mills literature.
Yeah.
What killed me is, so I looked it up. So because I thought, man, there's no way this is so blatantly, it feels so on the face of it racist that like there's no way a black guy wrote this. Anyways, he like retired, and then he came out of retirement. And he did like a little TikTok response in his car, and he's like, "No, I'm real, and I happen to be black."
It's not written by like a 4chan troll. I like Art Chat, but he's in several. I love Art Chat. I want to get Art Chat on Content Minded. I think I could do this. We're mutuals on most platforms. But I wonder. I mean, I hope I wouldn't be too unoptical for him, but that'd be great. I mean, if we could interview Art Chat. Anyways. Charlie Mackey for $25. Good evening. I hope you're both well. Thank you, Charlie Mackey.
Thanks, sir.
If people could pay me $100 to review My Baby Daddy Stole My Ultima, that'd be great. I mean, or no, the old one, the granny, what's it called? Quan Mill. Oh man, Quan Mills. Quan Mills. What's it called? Oh man, it's the granny next door is a hoe. I think that's what it's called.
Have fun with that one. I hope it's a monkey's paw, and it's gonna happen.
Someone's gonna pay me a C-No to review My Baby Daddy Stole My Ultima. That'd be that would be crazy. All right, moving on to the YouTube super chats. And I can't scroll up because again, I don't know what, maybe I gotta pay for another version of StreamYard. So let me go to my settings here. Where is it? Stupers right here. Okay. See all. What is this, September 15th? No.
Today is the 16th.
Okay, yeah. It says 15th for some reason.
Well, weird. I would read that one too. Maybe it was a super thanks or whatever they put in the comments section.
Yeah. Oh no, but here they are. September. Oh, here. Okay. $4.99 by Bolero393, our good friend. Rest in eternal peace, St. Charles, martyr of Provo. I mean, I wouldn't call him a saint, but you know.
He was certainly martyred, though.
He was certainly martyred, but I appreciate the sentiment of Bolero. Bolero for another $4.99. Sorry, Charlie is the martyr of creme. Piers Morgan hasn't been worth watching since he was on Celebrity Apprentice. That's
I don't know who originally had this take, but it's one I certainly agree with, is that 2028 will be the final episode of Celebrity Apprentice.
Whoa. And here we have again Bolero for $4.99. We'll see you in Valhalla. Don't mind the unexpected sewage smell. Oh, that's mean. Bolero. But thank you so much, Bolero, for your generous contribution. And Seasider, a good friend, for $10. The Redactor had the Eagle 500K bomb.
Oh yeah, he had that on one of the shells.
Yeah, what is that?
It's when you play Helldivers, there's a certain button combo that calls in a 500 kilogram bomb.
Oh,
and apparently that was etched or marked on one of the shell casings. Oh
wow. The most overused, boring, and lackluster strats in the game. He is truly hellbound. Oh man. And Dad, which is Wormwood, for $4.99. On the plus side, I've been praying more than ever lately. God bless Charlie and his family. God bless our people. God bless you both, Wormwood. Thank you, Wrestling with Wormwood. You are one of our good friends, and hope you come back to Twitter to, I'm not going to say what he usually likes to tweet in hashtags, but Anyways, but thank you so much. And Wormwood is also a family man, and I desperately hope he comes back to Twitter. I need updates on the Brap Hog. I need updates on your daughter and Wormwood Jr. and all of their various hijinks. And thank you, my friend. And Bolero again for $4.99. George Bagby is a national treasure, Southern aristocrat of the soul. Thank you, Bolero.
It's true.
And Jack for $5. Do you guys think people will start popping off libs because of what happened? No.
No. And if that were to happen, it's only going to happen after. It'll probably happen with law enforcement doing it, and it's going to be after they attack. I mean,
like that
if there is something about like American conservatives doing vigilante things, it's usually very rare and it's isolated. And most of the things that would have enabled that, like the militia movements of the 1990s, have been so thoroughly defanged and infiltrated for the last 30 years. No, I doubt it. But I mean, if someone feels like they're in a riot situation and someone says weapons free, then like, hey, we might get something, but I'm not holding my breath, and nor do I want it to happen, because that would mean some severe escalation of things, law and order breaking down very rapidly.
I mean, no doubt that there has been right-wingers that have done terrible things in recent history, but I don't see it happening, nor would I want it to happen, to be perfectly clear and honest. I do not endorse violence, and I do not endorse that type of action. I think that rooting out various extremists legally and
defunding their NGO sponsors.
Yeah, that's way more effective. And I think that it's terrible, and I don't endorse it. And it would, I mean, the reality is that, it would set the right wing back a lot, and, but not just only that, I think morally as well, I do not endorse. So I don't see it happening, though. I don't think that, hence why you haven't seen any riots. I mean, you have seen, there was this case where a TPUSA organization in a university tried to hold a public monument on campus for Charlie, and they were met with mockery and, I think the police had to break it up or something, like the campus security.
Yeah, so I think it happened in Texas somewhere.
Yeah, and they were making fun of Charlie's thing, and so no, I don't predict that happening, nor would I want it to happen. So publicly, that's anyways, so thank you, Jack. And Bolero again for $4.99. Favorite EMJ quote: Logos 101. The English. Oh my God, the Pete Buttigieg quote. That was, oh my God. Anyways, E. Michael Jones, what a character. I do not endorse C. Michael Jones. I do not endorse, but that was a funny clip. Sam153 for $5. Sneed to the goal, and we reached the goal. Thank you, Sam153, and Sam153 for $10. Super Sneed Pow. Thank you so much, Sam153, and Jan for $10. Go Leafs, go. I'm excited for the new hockey season. I know that Marner might affect the lines, but we'll see what happens. I mean, hopefully they've added enough sufficient grit. And maybe, I don't know, maybe they could do it where Willie Nylander and Matthew Nyes, they could replace, hopefully they can keep up with Marner's ability to feed Matthews the puck. And I hope Matthews is actually healthy this year. But, Marner is a traitor and a turncoat, and he's selfish. So you know what? I'm not that terribly broken up about Mitch Marner leaving for the Outlaw Mud Show expansion team, the Vegas Golden Knights. So, anyways. But yes, thank you, Jan. Go Leafs, go. And Jack for $5. His passing has affected many. I don't even like the guy, but I didn't even like the guy, but I still feel grief even now. I don't understand. Could you guys offer an explanation, please? There is no explanation. I mean, there is. You
witnessed a martyrdom and you witnessed an assassination in broad television, and you don't have to agree with him. You don't have to like him, but it just illustrates, one, how well organized your enemy can be without really being a formalized big org. And secondly, like, no one wants to see that, and no one should. And he was, for better or for worse or whatever you want to call him, he was sort of the young face and leader of, sort of the mainstream MAGA movement. And so for having a popular face and voice that has been a mainstay in our political realm for over a decade, come out of the woodwork and do his job and do his duty, and then to be killed for it is going to affect everybody regardless. I think I can tell you that, like, even I'm not close to him. I know people that were, and like, I watched the news unfold just like everyone else on the timeline and in chats, and my blood pressure was through the roof. And I was like, I felt so frustrated and just angry, in the same way I was for Irina, in the same way I was for the Catholic school, the same way it has been for all of my time being politically aware about things.
Children in Tennessee,
and the children in Tennessee and the Covenant shooting just over a year ago. It's like, I am. There are no words, because what are you supposed to do except be exposed to the worst wounds to the soul imaginable, the death of innocent and good people. And it's just like, what do you do except for the fact that you can only ask, how long, O Lord, until you give judgment to those that have wronged thee. And that's all you can do. And so I don't blame you. That's really the only explanation I can give, is that
couldn't have said it better myself.
That feeling is everywhere.
Now, I know that Charlie, he may have supported things that I consider abominable in terms of foreign policy, but I think that I was actually, I was shocked as well. I I didn't have a lot of feelings, positive or negative, towards him. I remember, like, the Graper War thing, and I think it was funny. And I think, the funny thing about that is that Charlie, I think a lot of people put their personal differences aside, and I think that was very important and very integral. And I think, like, there was stuff behind the scenes after the Great War stuff about, like, barring certain people, influencers. But, I think, like, Charlie, he moved on, and, and this whole narrative that, like, this media concocted narrative that it was a Groiper, like, that's such ridiculous nonsense. And it's like, I have no words for this level of lying and just despicable propagandizing. But, in a way, I anticipated this. To go from celebrating it to, oh yeah, it was one of our own, but actually, no, it was someone on the far right, to, no, it wasn't someone on the far right, but who cares? And, just the level of shameless and cretinous propagandizing is just, it's too, it is Darvo, 100% nudge unit. It's mass, wide-scale, media perpetrated Darvo. Exactly. That's 100% what this was. And, like, even to people that are so-called experts that should know better, just to go, like, this one on the CBC, this woman who's, like, some part of anti-hate, whatever, just, like, lying about it and saying that the guy was on the far right. It's just, it's disgusting. But I couldn't have said it better than Prude. So anyways, thank you so much, Jack. And Jan for $5 finally. Gio, have you ever seen The Art of Peter and Kathryn White? I believe I own a book of Kathryn White's landscape paintings. Canadian landscape painter from Banff of the same era as the Group of Seven. Yes, the husband and wife team. Were they husband and wife? Yeah, I think they were husband and wife. So I don't put my foot in my mouth. Also known for their landscape paintings. They're painting... Peter White was born the son of... Yeah, I think they were husband and wife. Yeah. So yeah, I have a book of Kathryn White's landscape paintings, but I definitely should research more into them. And I believe we have one more on... we have a few more, actually, on Entropy. So Sex Freakman again for $10. Thank you so much, Freakman. I will unironically pay a standard review fee if you can make sure to interview Art Chad or some guy in that circle and mess with him Sam Hyde style. I wouldn't mess with him that way. I don't have that. I don't have that spirit. Anyways, but thank you, Freakman. And our good friend Owen Zaleski. Hello, gents, for $5. Hello, gents. I hope you're both well. I love the art stuff I love the art stuff, Gio. I will try to comment more on the patrons post and YouTube videos so you know how much I love them. Do more art streams, Gio. Gio art will save the world. God bless you. Well, I plan to do a bunch of art shorts. I have a few of them recorded. So thank you so much, Owen Zaleski. And finally, from our good friend Sam153 again for $10. Content Minded with Zoomer Schopenhauer was a must listen to. Changed my way of thinking about energy. Thank you so much. I'm glad to hear that, Sam153. And it truly was a great episode. It was a very meaningful episode. And I feel like we hammered out a lot of very important topics. And so next week we'll be on Prude's channel. And Prude, do you have anything to show?
I have an article out this morning called, or earlier this afternoon, it's called Normie Sadism, Normie Extremism. It's part 1. Part 2 will drop this Thursday, and then both will be out as a video essay later. Probably next week. We'll be live next week as well. And then Dimes and I will be covering probably at the end of the month The Hour of Decision by Spangler on Do You Even Read? Tomorrow morning, for you early birds and for my friends in European time zones, I will be on Conscious Caracol's channel. I have to get up super early to be on. And we're going to talk about Charlie Kirk's assassination along with some other topics he sent me. And then sometime this month, Mr. D will be premiering his own YouTube channel, and I and Chris Sandbatch will be covering Twin Peaks, The Return.
Nice.
So it'll be a really great time. It's one of my favorite shows, one of my favorite pieces of media in the last 10 years. So it'll be a really good time. But that's what I got going on.
All right, beautiful. And yeah, so the Zoomer Schopenhauer one is up. I'll see if I can get a Content Minded together. Maybe not this week, but next. I've been quite busy. So as we always say, God bless, goodbye, too sweet.
See you, gents.